Good morning. My name is Laurie Bricker, and I'm chair of the Participation and Success Committee. And my vice chair is Glenn Phillips, and we have Brenda Pejovich, and also our newest member of the board, who is a student member who was appointed recently. His name is Charles E. Lewis III, known as Trey. And I will say that as a reminder, Senate Bill 1007 authorizes a student to serve as a student representative but prohibits the student from having voting privileges. However, we certainly welcome his input, and we're so glad that he's here. Mr. Lewis is originally from Harlingen, Texas, and attended the University of Texas at Austin, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in government. He is currently a first-year law student at the University of Houston, and his term on the committee expires May 2009. Welcome, Trey. We're really glad that you're here. Would you like to say a few words?
I'm just excited to be here, learning a ton of information. I think Mr. Shepard says kind of like drinking water out of a fire hose. So it's a little bit of information overload, but I'm just excited.
We're glad that you're here.
Well, thank you.
And feel free to ask any questions. Also, Commissioner Paredes is here, and Dr. Judy Laredo. And we're waiting, like I said, for a quorum, so we're going to skip.
20 minutes away.
She's 3 minutes away?
20.
Oh, 20. We're going to skip the minutes, adopting the minutes from the April 23rd meeting, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the committee chair's report. I have just a few things to talk about. One is I want to encourage all of us and everyone in the audience to make sure that you spread the word about applying for the STAR Awards. It's really the most prestigious award, and it has done so much for institutions and their successful programs by replicating them across the state, and I believe even out of state now. We do have that new category of K-12 or P-12, so if there are any organizations, institutions, businesses that you want to encourage, and I see Mary is over there, our guru and expert on the STAR Awards. I want to encourage everyone to send out the emails that we're receiving. It's on our website, how to apply, when to apply, what the deadlines are. It's extremely important that we get the word out. For example, there are chambers of commerce that have incredible relationships and partnerships with businesses, and with their businesses, with school districts, and with institutions of higher education. So I want to encourage everyone to get that word out. In addition, I attended the South Texas College commencement, and I'm still pretty much overwhelmed with the incredible success that South Texas College is having with students from all of the surrounding districts and their early college model. One of the things that they did that I found was incredible, well, everything that they did I found was incredible, but one of the things from their early college model, as the students walked across the stage, these are high school students who had not even received their diplomas yet. This was mid-May. They didn't get their diplomas till the end of May. They received their associate's degree. And as they walked across the stage, they not only announced their name and the associate's degree and the high school and school district from which they attended, but also where they were transferring to a four-year university, every single one of them. These were all predominantly minority students, all first generation, because I asked them, I said, raise your hands if you're, first generation, and it was really spectacular, and I have asked the staff if we can have them make a presentation about some of the successes that they're having at South Texas. Like I said, I was overwhelmed. Another thing that I feel like I should say publicly is many of us have gotten to know Dr. David Swedlow from NCAN, the National College Access Network out of Ohio. He passed away recently, unexpectedly, and many of you all had met him. He came to Houston and Dallas and I believe San Antonio to meet with us about potential grants for our P16s, for our high school to college initiatives. He took the Achieving the Dream, which many of our community colleges have had much success with, and turned it into a high school model called Preparing the Dream. And he was incredible. We made him a native Texan, an honorary Texan, at one of the NCAN conferences. He established some amazing partnerships with many of us throughout the state, and he will really be missed. His legacy, certainly his family and friends, but also his professional legacy definitely lives on. Just this last week, the 5 school districts that received the $3.5 million grant from Houston Endowment through NCAN and our P16 Council in Houston, the 5 school districts presented their proposals to move forward with the money that they will receive through the NCAN and Houston Endowment grant. So he is incredible, and he's a friend to all of us, and we'll certainly miss him. And finally, I wanted to announce that just yesterday, the Greater Houston P16 received another grant of $60,000 from the Simmons Foundation for the We Go Center. Remember, I talked about this about a year ago. We Go is a kind of maybe a silly concept, but when we talk about our college going access and Go Centers, we talked about how we could start that in early childhood as well. So this is the Med Center YMCA, which has about 100 children birth to 4 years old, and their parents, who are many paraprofessionals in the medical center, and the teachers. It's a combination grant with the Houston Reed Commission for literacy programs to be held at that facility, and a grant with Houston Community College and the YMCA, U of H, and Texas Southern. And what we'll do is use that money, and that's just seed money, to provide money for scholarships for the teachers in the preschool to continue their education, those that have post-high school to get associates or bachelors and beyond, and the parents of these children, but more importantly, focusing on the children at the center so that they will see every single day that they're in that center what it's like to say, I'm going to college. So this is the first of many for this We Go, and it's from the Simmons Foundation. Linda May is the executive director. Oh, we, W-E-E, We Go. Thank you, Lynn. It's cute. Okay, we're going to skip the adopting of the minutes and go to, let's see, agenda item 3, which is a presentation by TEA staff on the High School Completion and Success Initiatives Council. Jan Lindsay, who's the Senior Director of College Readiness Initiatives at the Texas Education Agency, will provide an overview of the Council's work and brief the committee on other public education initiatives on college readiness and success. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Chair Bricker, board members, Commissioner Paredes, it's an honor to be here. As you know, my name is Jan Lindsay, and I'm the Senior Director of College and Career Readiness Initiatives at TEA. And by no means is the area that I work in the only part of the agency involved in college readiness. Colleagues and other parts of the agency are very involved with college readiness as well, and I believe one of those will be speaking to you later on the agenda. I bring greetings to you from Commissioner Scott. Commissioner Scott has said that the place where our two agencies intersect is where some of the most interesting work is taking place in state government today, and that we're proud to be partners with the Higher Education Coordinating Board in that work. What I'd like to do today is to brief you a little bit on the activities and accomplishments of the Texas High School Completion and Success Initiatives Council, which we refer to simply as High School Council, despite the fact that we're all rather long-winded. This council is playing a role in the college readiness work, and that is one of the reasons why we felt like it would be of interest to you. Like any new kid on the block, the high school council began its first days trying to figure out what was going on in the neighborhood and who were the main players. And consequently, and not surprisingly, they asked staff to brief them on what the activities and accomplishments of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board and the state P16 Council were, recognizing that these are two of the main players in college readiness. So now that a big piece of their work has been accomplished, I'm here to brief you on what they have accomplished and what they have been dealing with in the last couple of months. Let me just start real briefly. Okay, I was afraid this would happen. There. Okay. Talking to you about the creation of the council. The council was established, and everybody has a handout if it's easier to look at that. But the council was established by the 80th Texas Legislature through House Bill 2237. The statutory purpose of this council was to focus on high school completion and college and workforce readiness. And to that end, the council was directed to identify strategic priorities and to make recommendations to improve the effectiveness, coordination, and alignment of those efforts. The legislature had some specific ideas in mind when they created the council and who that they wish to see serving on it. They were statutorily mandating that the membership consist of persons who have distinguished experience in both high school reform strategies as well as college and workforce readiness. Not surprisingly, the two members that were specifically named in statute were Robert Scott, Commissioner of Education at the Texas Education Agency, and Dr. Raymond Paredes, Commissioner of Higher Education here at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. In addition to these two, 7 other members were added to the council, and I've listed them here briefly. Mr. Chris Barvick, who is head of schools at Yes College Prep. Dr. Don McAdams, who works with school boards and is president of the Center for Reform of School Systems. Dr. Rod Page, who's had a role on the national stage as well as here in Texas as former U.S. Secretary of Education and currently chairman of the Chartwell Education Group. Ms. Chris Patterson, who worked on the Commission for a College Ready Texas as a research and policy consultant. Ms. Cindy Ramos-Davidson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Rosa Maria Vida, Superintendent of the Diocese of Laredo. And finally, Mr. James Wyndham, who is President of the Texas Institute for Educational Reform. This distinguished group of professionals was charged with several specific tasks. The 3 major tasks were to identify strategic priorities, to make recommendations for the use of federal and state funds, and then thirdly, to recommend statutory changes, all to promote high school completion and college and workforce readiness. The key accomplishment of this new council is the development of a strategic plan, which I believe each one of you has a copy of. This strategic plan was designed to accomplish 4 major objectives. One was to identify those strategies that were believed to be effective. 2, to measure the strategy's success by establishing goals that could be then calibrated and measured. 3rd, to develop strategies for aligning and coordinating our efforts. And then 4th, to identify key objectives for research and evaluation. To accomplish this, the High School Council set out a rigorous work schedule for itself to ensure the development of a quality plan. So before adopting the strategic plan, the council met 8 times, and I believe it was just a few months. They reviewed numerous research studies. They considered strategic plans that have been developed by councils who have related missions, and consequently, 2 of the strategic plans that they looked at first was the P16 strategic plan and the coordinating boards Closing the Gaps. They consulted with national experts, just a few of which I've mentioned here, Dr. Gene Bottoms of SREB and Dr. Jay Schmink with the National Dropout Prevention Center. The council also heard testimony from key state and local participants who've been active in P16 work. The type of person that came and testified include people such as Dr. Abe Saavedra, Superintendent of Houston ISD. Council also received input from currently funded grantees on their successes and challenges that they were experiencing. Also considered was testimony from representatives of higher education institutions that are involved in a lot of this P16 college readiness work. One of the notables here was Dr. Richard Rhodes, president of El Paso Community College. Private foundations also address the council, particularly those that are involved in supporting high school reform and college readiness. And then finally, an active effort was undertaken to solicit and receive public testimony. You have a copy of the strategic plan that was developed as a result of this work, but I'd like to give you just a sample of one of the objectives that the council addressed. And I think this sample will give you an indication of why Commissioner Paredes characterized this plan as being a major step forward in the state's efforts to address college readiness. Establishing a P16 focus was one of the key objectives that the council set forth in the strategic plan. And a few of the means by which it suggested it be implemented was, first of all, each of the grantees that receives funds through the Texas Education Agency and the coordinating board's involvement as well are to develop a P16 strategic plan. Secondly, the council encouraged the creation of partnerships between local public school districts and institutes of higher education by requiring that every grantee establish a plan so that students will graduate with an opportunity to earn college credit hours. And Chair Bricker, you mentioned the Early College High School in South Texas. That's an excellent example, I think, of the partnership that's been forged between the two agencies and on the local level. And then finally, the council required the use of college readiness standards in all of our comprehensive whole school reform programs that we're funding. So I hope that with that little bit of a insight and peek into what's included in the high school council's plan, that you might be interested in looking at it a little bit further, and I'd like to make myself available to answer any questions that you might have about the council or the plan.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, you want to make some comments?
Well, yes, thank you. First of all, I wanted to say that this council is another example of the growing understanding by staff at both the Texas Education Agency and the coordinating board that we can't reach our mutual educational goals without working effectively together. I thought that the council was a very effective instrument for promoting the concept of college readiness. Of course, I was the one that proposed that the college readiness standards that have been adopted by both the coordinating board and by Commissioner Scott, that they be incorporated as a central element of virtually everything we do going forward in terms of P16 reform and activity, and I was very pleased that Commissioner Scott enthusiastically endorsed that principle, as did other members of the council. So I thought that this was a very good experience in which, once again, the two agencies worked very closely together to get better educational outcomes for all the young people in Texas, and I'm looking forward to continuing working that closely again.
Absolutely. Other comments? Well, I'd like to add that probably one of the greatest strengths of our commissioner and of Commissioner Scott is that they recognize the need for those relationships, that there's no way there can be an effective P16 model in our state without the two of them and their leadership working together with both their boards and both agencies. So that's very, very critical. I want to also add that I know several of the members of this committee, some extremely well. I have known Chris Barbick since he was employed with HISD. I've known Don McAdams. He and I were colleagues on the board of HISD, and I actually did some work with him when he was starting the center. And of course, Rod Page was my superintendent. And James Wyndham, I should not share with you, but he's also the head of the rodeo in Houston. And the last time I decided I was going to be friends with him, he made me ride a bull, a longhorn steer, I should say. into the rodeo, and the Spirit, I had a different point of view, and I was in the hospital after that. But anyway, I'm sure that Mr. Wyndham has, other strengths. Just don't get on a Longhorn steer. But anyway, this really is a very impressive group of individuals, and I would like to propose that sometime in the near future that maybe we could have some sort of a joint workshop with them, maybe informally I'd like to hear firsthand the kinds of things that they're discussing, and with TEA as well, so that maybe there could be some sort of joint workshop. I think that would be really powerful, and I think maybe a lot of us would do a whole lot more listening than talking, but I'd really like to hear what they have to say. And I appreciate your telling us about their first 8 meetings in a couple of months, and look forward to any future meetings and the outcomes of those. I honestly believe that this is probably going to make more of an impact than we can even imagine.
Thank you, and we will definitely keep you all posted on their future work.
I'm going to ask one more time. Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we'll move to agenda item 4, which is a discussion of the Texas College Readiness Mandates, Responsibilities, and Deadlines document. Dr. Judy Laredo, Assistant Commissioner of P16 Initiatives, will present this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your packet, you have the agenda supporting item with the updates of where we are in each of those areas. It sort of comes as a follow-up of the other document that is also in your packet that I refer to as the legal document.
She means legal size.
Legal size.
It took us all a while to figure that out.
And it was given to me, it was in legal size. Of course, it's been cut down to the regular 8.5 by 11. But what I've tried to do is to provide the update on that legal document of all of the items addressing House Bill 1 and where we are with each of those. It took us a little while, and I have to thank the TEA staff for being so helpful in providing the information. So you had that also to review, so you would know where we are. And then in addition to that, the current document you have under this item is what was presented to you last time when I had just come on board, and they had tried to modify it so it was a lot easier to follow. You will notice that much of the things that are on there are being in the completion project stage right now, and there are reporting processes, evaluations that are being prepared and will be in your packet in October. The other thing, I think a question that was raised last time, and I said that I would begin to address that, we are also beginning to look at the budget expenditures of how much money has been spent in each of the areas, what is remaining, and what may need to be, continue to be used, so that you have an accounting every time when we come forth. So we have been working with Susan Corinne and Mr. Rios on that, so I could have a monthly accounting process. So that's why the numbers that you see there, what is reflected as of this point. And if you have specific questions that I might not be able to answer because of my newness of stuff that has gone in the past, the staff is also here present that might be working with each of these areas. Many things are taking place right now in terms of the college readiness standards, of getting them out in the field, in addition to beginning to look at educator preparation, connecting us to those college readiness standards, to the deans, etc., taking those college readiness standards out in the field to superintendents. So there's a lot of things that are cross-matching that are in the planning processes right now. So that's where I stand at this point.
Any questions or comments? You have a question, I can tell.
I just sort of feel like I'm not updated. I mean, I just don't know what's happening with all the implementation issues.
Well, give me a specific.
Well, like,
which one would you like?
The system must be implemented no later than the 2008.
Oh, you're looking at
on the electronic.
I'm on the wrong page. Okay, you're back to my legal document.
Which one are you looking at?
Yeah, I was looking at the shorter version.
I'm on the same one. We're looking at
Where is it?
this handout, and it's the page 2, electronic student records, and I actually had a question about that as well.
Go ahead. The electronic student records, Lois is right here. She's the one that provided, what I did is I went to the key individual staff within the agency that's been working either with TEA or et cetera, since I was not directly involved with that. And Lois can answer your
Yeah,
question.
this is specifically a TEA effort, and Lois has been participating with it.
Great. Okay, Lois, you want to update us on, in particular, the electronic student records?
Yes, as it relates to higher ed, the portion we've been working with is getting electronic high school transcripts in for students graduating from high school and going into higher ed. And this week or next, TEA is sending out a letter to all of their high schools and superintendents saying you need to be ready to go August 1 and be able to trade with an institution of higher education. There's been a notice that's gone out on the TACRA website, that's for admissions officers and registrars, saying your institution needs to be able to receive these transcripts electronically when the high schools are ready. And what we found the problem is high schools have, been working on the transcripts that go between other high schools and junior high and things like that, and haven't been able to focus yet on the higher ed piece. So that was the last piece for them to work on. Institutions of higher education are required, just like high schools, to be ready for this. We're also drafting a letter for the commissioner to send out to institutions of higher education reiterating that they do need to be ready for this. So there's been training across the state for institutions of higher education, and we've got, there's a website on, excuse me, on UT's Speedy server website, because everything's going through this server at UT, that tells them, step by step, here's how you download the transcripts. If you can't download it into your computer system, here's how you can print it off and do what you normally do with transcripts. So there's some very specific information out there for institutions of higher education, and everybody who's able to accept is willing to help each other. So, I think it's going to go fairly smoothly.
Any other questions? I want to take a moment to welcome Elaine Mendoza, who's joined us through the traffic. Next time you have to just... Next time just fly. Glad you're here. I have a further question about this, and it's really not pointing any kind of blame at all at anyone. However, there probably isn't a P16 meeting that I've attended that this hasn't come up, where individual school districts as well as institutions of higher education are looking at contracting for this very same thing. They're still talking about the one that TBEC had presented 3 years ago, Triand. They're still talking about, as a matter of fact, the grant that I mentioned earlier, one of the school districts had put into their proposal for that grant to contract with someone for student data records. And in this, it's more than just high school completion to college or to community college and then that next step. It's grade completion, assessment, instruments, results, personal graduation plans, and other information. And I know that Matt Orem is working on that as well. I think that somehow or another the lines of communication are not getting to the school districts. And I know that, for example, Dr. Gardner's working with Alamo Community College on CalPass, and then they've gone to Houston Community College, and they're kind of expanding that.
We think we're going to move into El Paso next. We've already got a project on the board to do that.
And I think that there's just a lot of conflicting pieces of information, and what I fear is that one of the districts said, well, we already have, Houston actually said, we already have ours in place and we're tracking all these kids, but they're not speaking to each other. And I don't know quite how to solve that.
And I'm not sure, I know that the project manager, and I don't know if that's the right term, but overseeing TEA's portion of this has changed, and she's done a lot of communicating with the field. So things may have changed some there. I'm not sure. I'll check with her, but I do know that there's another letter that's getting ready to go out to the field. And they did, what we all do when we've got so many school districts or so many people to train, you do the train the trainer model, where you go to the regional service centers and say, okay, you train them, and then you give them the information to go out and work with the school districts. And I know that was the model that they used because the state is so large. So I don't know, if it's pockets that we're seeing or what, but
It's discouraging because we all want the same thing.
Yeah.
We all want to be able to track students, and we know that they're mobile. We know that they're going to be moving school district to school district. We know that they're going in and out of private and public schools and in and out of community college to four-year, but there's all this money invested in each of these individual institutions that is duplicating one another, and it's troublesome because
and hopefully everybody will get on board with T-Rex, and it's no cost other than changing your own computer system to feed the information in, but the mechanism itself.
Well, if you can talk to TEA,
I will.
and
I will.
I think probably TASA would be the best avenue to get it to all the superintendents at least, and get it that direction, and then the higher ed, I guess, is our responsibility.
Yeah, and we've been we've been using other avenues in higher ed to make sure that the people who need to implement this know. There was a workshop held for higher ed on May 8th. That went through, it was more technical than anything I really want to know about, but here's how you do it. It was for those people to set up the process.
I think all of us have had the same anecdotal experience for years now, and I think this is costing the state so much money that we might need to appeal to the governor's office or the legislature to do some sort of public interest campaign so that this T-Rex can explain that he's not obsolete, but that indeed he's just huge. Extinct. Yeah, obsolete or extinct. And that instead he's just huge and is going to encompass everything that we need as far as data is concerned. Commissioner, I really think this is an urgent need.
Well, I agree. We're doing what we can. We will redouble our efforts to make sure we get out information and to inform superintendents and others of what we're doing, and try to get people to pull in the same direction and, to the extent possible, use the same instruments.
I think, and I missed the first part of this because I was asking TK a question about the system, but from what I understand you're talking about, there is a distinction that has to be made, I think, between the system that Lois is talking about and the other issue, which is we have the data system in place to do much of what they're talking about already.
No, wait. The data system to do much of what?
What I think came up in I'm assuming this has something to do with it in Houston, where they're talking about sharing data and being able to track students. What this really enables people to do is, at the public school level, there's a great importance because in the past, as I understand it, it took far too long when a student changed schools for the transcript to follow them so that the school could do the proper placement of the student. I mean, that's very critical. It means the student can be in the right place at the right time, taking the right courses much sooner, I'm presuming, because of this process. The other piece of it, and that we had asked for several years ago, was that we have the higher ed piece so that, in fact, you could make application to the institution more easy. Institutions were already getting transcripts, and the one piece that isn't really talked about in this that could add data is individual grades in individual courses. That is not a part of this system and wasn't intended to be.
Actually, we've asked for that in one of the next phases. What we've said is once we have a higher ed GPA model, once we know what that formula is going to be, we want the T-REX system to calculate that and place that on the...
That's not what I'm talking
Oh, that's
about.
not, okay.
No, I'm talking about,
That's the
right
problem, is
now,
nobody knows what, can you give a name to what, see, I thought you were talking about T-Rex. So what are you talking
well,
about?
when Ms. Bricker brought up this other issue, that's the tracking issue. This isn't really tracking. This is getting a record of the curriculum they took and the courses, actual student records, and they took this course and that course, this was their grade. When they go to the next school, what should they be placed in? Then on the higher ed end, since we have this system in place, let's make it easier for the student records, the transcripts to get to colleges.
Right.
I mean, that's specifically the purpose for which it was designed. It wasn't designed to track per se.
What do we have that track? Tell us what, I think we get what T-Rex is. What's this other thing?
It's what we've had in place for about 10 or 12 years, which is a PETA-16 data system, which we put, it's TPRA, the Texas Public Education Information Resource, which has it's had a website for a number of years, and it shows, it has the basic information in terms of who's going on to college and that type of thing. So any high school, if they want to, can right now look and see, we had this many people go on to Texas College University. You could say how many went to university, how many went to community college, how many went to Independence, since the Independence provided us that data in the last few years. We've added that into the piece. And let me just make a note, DeVry has told us they're going to provide us student records before July.
Yep.
So that will be included. So that's in place, and in that system, there is a record for every single student that's in the public schools, for every single student that's in public higher education, and every single student that's in ICUT, in an ICUT institution. So with that, we've been able to, for a number of years, follow students through the system. You've seen where we've our graph before, where we've shown the 7th grade cohort. You'll recall where here's where they are in the 8th grade, here's where they are, and then this is how many enroll in higher education in Texas. That's because of the system we've developed with TEA. We can follow that student from school to school. In fact, you'll recall 17,000 of those students left the public schools at some point, but we found them in higher ed. So we have that system in place, and that's one of the things that I think is part of the frustration that the public schools don't understand and use more, because they're trying to develop, it sounds like, local systems for which we're already able to provide that, and we need to find a better way of communicating that to them, and I think, with TEA we can find a way to do that. The piece in terms of CalPAS pathway, what we call pathway in Texas, it's in addition, is that with local agreements with ISDs, community colleges, and higher education institutions in that area, they're adding in individuals' classroom performance. You really have to have local agreements for it. So they're signing local agreements. We're providing the technology to provide it, to connect it to the other data we have, housed on our servers, and to produce reports for local educators to sit down and say, how are our students performing in our own systems? So in that sense, it's a local endeavor. They can agree they want to share that information with each other. We don't really look at that. We won't look at that. It will be the local educators who are using that data. So that's that piece of the development. That went on at the same time. I'm not sure why the legislation on the electronic transcript was started. My sense is it's because of this need for movement across public schools initially. And the piece moving on to higher ed was added because it doesn't take any really additional effort to use that to make it easier for students to apply to colleges and universities. Have I confused things? There's a lot to this. We're doing a lot.
I think that there's at least 2, maybe 3 different things going on at once. One is
what we've been doing, in particular with the 7th grade cohort and moving that forward, that's looking at numbers, I think, maybe more than individuals. I think what we're talking about with the electronic student records is a school district wants to follow this particular child and see where he goes from school to school, what his needs are for graduation, and then track him into community college or higher ed. And I think that's real different than, and I also think Matt Orum's research is yet another layer. I think that we've got a lot of conflicting and overlapping things.
Well, what the one thing that's missing from the current system is what TEA doesn't house in their system is what grade did a student make. They have whether the student passes or fails, if I recall correctly. We had the analysis of the algebra, but you don't know if they made an A, a B, a C, or a D. That's the one thing that's added through the pathway approach to the skills of degree. It's the one thing that one could add through the transcripts if one were to choose to do that. That has, to my knowledge, hasn't been discussed.
And that's a pure student data record. That's really what makes it pure. Other than that, you're talking about numbers, which are very helpful. But I think what we're looking at is, this particular high school, this particular student, what is it going to take for this student to graduate? Is that student prepared? Is he graduating with the recommended curriculum? Is he going to go to community college or high school? Really tracking him. And I don't know that we're there.
And T-REX wasn't designed to house any of that data. T-REX was designed as a pass-through, as a way to get it from this school to, this high school to this high school, this high school to this college. But there's no data actually housed in T-REX.
That's specifically what the pathway model is designed to do.
Right.
And the reality, at least as FERPA exists now, it's the local folks who have to agree to do that, because it's a level of access to the data that at this point you can't really provide at the state level. We can't, if that data were to come to us without those local agreements in place, we couldn't share that data.
Right, and we talked about students that are not legal residents and how they could be tracked through PEMS data or numbers assigned to them as opposed to Social Security.
Well, the data now is designed for the ERCs. What's happening is that number, this is something we've already had in the works for some time with TEA, and the data and the data set prepared for the research centers uses, in fact, that exact process. And that will mean, in terms of internally, the data that's used, because of that process, we're going to use that same approach.
Perhaps maybe we can resolve this somehow. If between now and, say, the board meeting, if between TEA and our agency, if we can figure out kind of who owns the process of which part of it. It's not a turf battle, but it's a turf issue, and that we need to resolve this because it's so important for these school districts to be able to track their kids. I believe one of the superintendents said, how can I be accountable for the success of a high school graduate when I don't know where he's going and I have no way to track him?
Well, I think we have to define the issue. I think the issue is they can do that right now. The issue is we haven't been effective in developing a mechanism so they use what's available. I mean, you'll recall when we met with a superintendent and you asked that we show them, and they didn't seem to be interested once we showed it to them. Let's be honest. I mean, it was there. We showed them on the screen who went on where. So
and Susan Brown gave them all this information at one of those conferences. She gave them all that data.
Well, I'm sorry?
Susan Brown gave them.
And when we meet with the P-16 Council, when we've had our local meetings, we've actually provided to schools not only where they've gone, but their retention rates in the first year for their students and their graduation rates. We haven't systematically provided that online. We plan to, and working with the E3 Alliance, we've developed even more fine measures, which we need to make more available, which is by program area. So those several hundred hours we spent with E3 Alliances has proven to be helpful. We've done those numbers for the statewide. We just need to figure out a way to put it in a format, get it to the right people.
It's a communication issue. We
Exactly.
need a public service announcement type thing with this. If we could put it all under this T-Rex guy and he could be talking and he could tell students what they could do with it, teachers, superintendent, he could talk to each user and say, here's what you can do. Because we need to think about the users. Here we are, we've been talking about this for 3 years and I can't explain it to anybody. And I was going to use you as a guinea pig, Trey, and say, okay, can you tell us? You don't get it, do you, from this? See, I mean, it's a communication issue. You're doing great, but everybody's doing great and trying to make these reports. But we need help. We need public service announcements. We need the governor or somebody to give us some.
Okay, and you had made a suggestion about, maybe something on the steps of the Capitol. And I do think you need something.
Yeah, we can let that.
Or, like, gee, look what we can do, and here's how we're enabling folks. Now, I want to tell you that a reality of any data system is you can make great strides, and as soon as you have it in place, people always want more.
Something else, yeah.
So,
But we
and
can tell them what it can do.
well, and you always need to develop it further. And so should never be a finished product. You should always work on improvement. But I do think you're exactly right. The communications and the PR has just been dismal
We
in
could
terms
show
of this.
how much money the state's wasting through the school districts, then someone would help us.
The irony is, other states know what we can do and what we've done together. We were just at a meeting with the Luma Foundation in North Carolina, and they were talking about Texas being one of the less than a handful of states who are capable to do this, and our opportunities to do things because TEA and the Coordinating Board work so well together on this.
I read about that all the time, in the literature, and I'm thinking, I must be the only board member who doesn't get this yet. But now I see that I'm not.
Well, I think maybe I can help at least in the short run. And one of the things that I'd like to do is offer if you all would like to come to the P16 meeting in Houston and just listen to their concerns. Maybe I'm not articulating it well enough, and maybe if they were to say, here are the things that we don't understand, and if you could come and present this document about what our charges are with TEA, with moving forward with that former House Bill 1, and then if others would like to follow suit, maybe that would help us understand what the questions are better.
I do think it would be nice for them to tell us exactly what they want.
Okay.
We might be able to miraculously produce it within a week.
Well, just be careful.
Depending on what it is. But
knowing
it'd
that
be
you're
nice.
asking them what they want.
But it would be nice really to know, because at some level, given what we can do,
Right.
I think there must be something we're missing. And if there is, we should try to address it.
It is. We have to figure out a way to do it better. I was just saying that to Linda, that we've contacted any number of groups about this, and yet the information hasn't reached the level of individual high schools, so that principals know what kind of data is available to them and how they can use it. So
I've contacted one, like with email, I sent an email the same night asking for feedback. It was the second time I contacted them in a month. It's been probably another month I haven't heard back from them. So we're just going to have to be real aggressive. We're going to
It's
have
important
to.
because it's a huge we've got this wonderful product. It's a huge financial savings.
well, we are going to start this Friday. I'm supposed to talk to the Texas Association of Secondary School Principals on college readiness. I'm going to put at least 5 minutes into my presentation about our data capabilities.
And TEA, Commissioner, the TEA is spending some money on revising the website. I think that the face of the T-Peer website is much better and clearer than it was before. It may be that we need to send over several pages of this so they can see exactly what they can get.
When I first
We can do more than what's there.
when I first started getting interested in this, I went to my local ISD and they told me, you couldn't possibly get that information. Then I went to the T-Peer thing and there it all was. And I I could get it all, but, I mean, this was the data person at the ISD who told me I couldn't do it.
Right.
One quick question, David, does this pathway program, in addition to showing students' grades and courses, show which teacher they have?
I believe it does.
It does. So researchers would be interested.
Well, and it's the way it's set up. It's designed for local researchers, so school districts working with, so they can look and they can say in San Antonio, they go into Alamo Community College. If they find that their students are consistently having trouble with chemistry, the faculty for the schools and higher can sit down and look at those records and say, okay, can we trace it to some point, and so we can fix it. So the idea is, it's not a gotcha type of system, but a system to get in and really fix it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Users, I think we need to think about the users, not what we have, but who wants to use it which way.
I think you're right.
I wanted to cite an example of how that Pathways data system can be used. This is an example that came out of California. Was called to my attention that they did some study they did an analysis of students who were taking 4 years of English and how they were doing in entry-level English courses at community colleges and universities. And they found out that there was no significant improvement in the outcomes in the college level courses after students took a 10th grade level English course. So that apparently the last 2 years of English were having no impact whatever on the greater capability of students to succeed in the courses. And so they went back and they looked at the courses that students were taking in high school, and they found out something that was pretty obvious after the fact. And they found out that the junior and senior year in high school, the focus was entirely on reading novels, reading, and very little emphasis on writing. So the last writing intensive course was the 10th grade, and the junior and senior year levels of English were all focused on students reading as much as possible. And they introduced a writing component or stronger writing components into the junior and senior years, and very quickly they saw that there was an impact. That's how nuanced this data collection system is, and it would be enormously helpful to us once we expand it across the state.
And the importance is that at the local level, they can know some of those nuances. You can never report all of that. You wouldn't want them to. It's too costly. But when the local faculty sit down and look at that, they have direct access to that information. One difference from CalPAS I'd like to point out that's reminded me of is that the reports that are designed to be prepared, designed to come out of the system for the local teachers, is designed within the framework of the college readiness standards. So at some level, this is almost an early adoption of a vertical team at a local level in terms of really sitting down, looking at the data, looking at college readiness to see how it's playing out. So we made that change to how we were doing it in Texas.
We will, at the July board meeting, we will let you all know what we've been doing, and meanwhile, to address this issue that you are rightfully concerned about.
And be sure you have my dinosaur balloon.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad there's really no point in having the data if it's not used effectively. We were talking earlier about data and how much we were collecting, and one of my personal concerns when I first came here was we had immense amounts of data that I didn't think we were using effectively, and that people wanted. And I think the board's helped reach a point where it's going to be much more useful to folks and beyond just formula funding, and that people can use it in an effective kind of way. Otherwise, one could doubt whether we should just be collecting it.
Right. Well, I know this is more frustrating for you than anybody else, so bear with us.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Are there other questions
You will notice there are some items that have TEA solely on there where there is no statement. It's because we could not get a current status. And I don't want to put her on the carpet or anything, but Dr. Sharon Jackson is here from TEA. I don't know if she can address any of them at all.
Okay.
But I didn't want to share that with you. The issue on the vertical teams in your document, you've got a full status. We are at that second phase of that vertical team process where they are going to be doing the gap analysis. We've gotten some outstanding recommendation on the individuals to serve on that, and I don't know if you'd like to speak to Eddie. There will be a full report or a larger report on the vertical team process first phase at your October board meeting, but Eddie Hyatt also can provide additional information should you have any questions regarding that.
Okay. And,
The one on the 4x4 curriculum, you know the curriculum is in place. I've given you a status on the college credit program.
So have we solved all the dual credit problems statewide or not?
No, I don't.
You know, there's some districts and individual schools that have difficulties in able to provide the dual credit that was required by the legislation, and I'm just wondering what they're doing with that. Are we told that in here? I'm trying to read.
It's on page 5, and I think what you're referring to is the fact that there are high schools under the law they're supposed to offer up to 12 hours of college credit for dual credit purposes, and there are high schools, whether they are within an urban setting, that are having problems getting teachers and or professors to teach, as well as in rural settings where they can't access. And I know that the instructor has to have 18 hours of master's level work in that subject area in order to teach it. But I believe they're getting around it because it's also, can it be, what was it? There was another, it can be an AP, right. Back to South Texas College, they figured it out. They remember we've talked for a number of years about the defaulting to AP and AP defaulting to dual credit, so that they take it simultaneously, and if they take the AP exam and score what they need to score to pass, that is the credit that they need for college. If they don't, they get the dual credit. So either way, they get it.
A lot of college people who aren't happy with that.
Well, the college is, from what we hear, probably anecdotally more than anything else, is that are these students as prepared? Are the courses as rigorous?
And Dr. Stafford's team area did a survey, and then that results of the survey, I think, are in your report, and some of the issues, but that's all they have been able to garner at this point. But
no one has responsibility for it.
That's true.
I was thinking that, you know, it's important to me that we make sure that students, or no student statewide is suffering from not being able to get this at their school.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to point something at you. Page 10 of the report, the agenda item, item G addresses the issue that you're referring to, Ms. Bricker, on the 18-hour graduation certificate. This is a project that we're piloting to see if it works. This is being done in the rural area of Northeast Texas, and it's a consortium project. But we recognize the issue, and we're going to see how this works in terms of getting more people in the area of math, more teachers in the area of math equipped to teach those courses, those dual enrollment courses.
Okay. Is distance education
That's an option too.
playing any role? I mean,
Distance education.
Oh, yes, yes, and I'm really not the expert on this. There are people from TEA, and certainly James Goman knows way more about it than I do, but I did want to point out this project, and I think we're doing it both with, as a by the way, distance learning is very important. As you mentioned, advanced placement and the International Baccalaureate program are all meeting those needs.
I think the education service centers are assisting with that, especially for those rural settings.
is it a TEA responsibility there that's just left out here?
Yes, that is the TEA area. Well, it's not the sole area because we are the higher ed side of the house, but it is courses that are offered in their domain.
Well, I know that, but I mean, in terms of the responsibility for meeting the legislative requirement, that we don't have anybody here, I'm just wondering if that was left out, or...
And I can answer that for you. That was originally left out on the original document as well. I just went to Dr. Stafford because that did fall in his area, but on the original document did not have an assignment.
Thank you.
But we had talked about kind of featuring this at the beginning of maybe the committee meeting, the committee portion of the board meeting. Is that something that we can still do?
Yes.
Because I think that probably this is pretty much the heart and soul of what our goals are on this committee. So if we could, in our board meeting, start with that and kind of walk us through, not to get bogged down too much, but just walk us through so that we have a better understanding of where we are on each of these items. Would that be, okay.
And we'll have the updates that you've asked for.
Thank you.
As well.
Okay.
And we better have the chart and the narrative, because everybody's used to the chart.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, any other questions?
Some of the other areas where you didn't have the response, for example, and of course assessment, we have been in dialogue with TEA. They've been most gracious. We will be probably working with them in August with their team as they are moving forth in that area. So at this point, there's just nothing to report. They are addressing that issue, but I don't have the information for you. We won't have any until August.
Under objective, number 6, objective 3, improve the rigor of the senior year in high school. Have you all been in conversation with TEA about that as well?
I think Abby has. She's been attending some meetings, yes. Yes, she can address that.
And by the way, going back to the dual enrollment issue, we are meeting, there's a little task force of staff from both TEA and the coordinating board that meet on a regular basis, and I think we've got a good idea of what's happening where. However, anytime we're talking about curriculum and Sharon Jackson's in the room, I always feel a little insecure, but the 4x4, as you know, was adopted and is being implemented.
If Sharon would like to come up and talk to us.
I segued that rather nice.
Yeah, you did. Passing the back here. No, it's just if there's any way that we can help by asking questions or by facilitating, the relationship that we have is so important. And, we're all out in the community hearing, well, the 4x4 this or that, or the dual credit this or that. So, what is your take on this, and how can we help you?
Good morning. I'm Sharon Jackson, Associate Commissioner for Standards and Programs at TEA. Madam Chair, other board members, Commissioner Paredes. Some of the things that we're hearing out in the field about the 4x4, which was implemented this school year with this year's freshmen, is that it's not flexible enough, meaning that kids don't have enough courses to take to make sure that they can graduate on time. They don't have the time to take the courses because some schools are still double blocking. So we are beginning to work. The commissioner has heard those comments, and he's beginning to work internally with staff to come up with some recommendations for the field. We are currently involved in our curriculum revision process, as you know. So one of the things that we're doing with our career and technical education courses, or will be a recommendation when those teams come back together again this summer, is to look at the CTE courses and see how we can integrate some of the academic courses. For example, a geometry course that has an emphasis on aviation, so that if a student is in a program of study and that particular course, the geometry course with the emphasis on aviation, fits more into his or her schedule than the academic geometry course, then that would be available for he or she to take. So we're looking at some really innovative and creative ways to do that. We have 2 Texas districts that are actually doing that now that we are going to have conversations with. We've contacted SREB to see who in our southern regional states are actually having these kinds of situations. So we're trying to find some ways to accommodate because we know that school districts only have so much time during the day, and the flexibility is not always there depending on the schedules that are put in for the school districts. So we are working on that, and maybe in a couple of months we'll have some recommendations coming out of the agency that we'd be more than happy to share with you.
Thank you. There are actually 2 things that I hear. One is the career technology side of it that you addressed, and the other is, the fine arts and where are those going to go and that sort of thing. And part of it, I think that now that we've kind of accepted the fact that students are going to take high school courses in 8th grade, that helps. Part of it is they're on block scheduling. It gives them more flexibility. But for all the school districts that aren't or don't or can't provide it, is there an avenue that you all have, like, for example, at your CASB conference, where you could offer, like, one of the breakout sessions to really discuss that so that more superintendents and school board members and all get more comfortable with it?
We don't, and I just want to mention that we are looking at fine arts also, as we're also looking at career and technical education. We don't have an avenue for that. My deputy and I are actually have a presentation with the superintendents, their annual conference week after next, and we will kind of get some feedback from them at that time regarding this issue. But we don't have a breakout where we actually go and discuss issues. I think we know what the issues are.
I think you hear them, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Commissioner?
Well, if it's at all possible, I would like if we could be involved in that process. We have some ideas here at the coordinating board about those 4x4 courses. I have some experience working in that area. For example, 4th-year course in English, they could focus on playwriting, performance and playwriting, which would take care of the artistic component. There's a lot of evidence around the country that the one course that is the greatest predictor of college success is some course related to debate. And
I'm a former speech and debate teacher.
And you could develop a course that around the idea of constructing arguments, encouraging young people to look at both sides of an argument instead of the kind of cleavages that we have in American culture around so many different issues. There's a course that I saw in I'm trying to remember, I think it was a suburban school district in New York. It was a 4th-year course in research and development, and it taught students how you take basic research and you convert it into technology and practical applications, which would be a wonderful course for an awful lot of students. We talk about the lack of sufficient relevance in so many of the courses that are offered. We would love to work with you, because if our commitment is to get students both college and skilled workforce ready, then I think it would be very helpful if higher education were involved, particularly people at the community college level. When students are going to take some basic CTE courses in high school and then go on to community college and take more advanced courses in the same area. So it makes a lot of sense that we have some higher education involved, and we would love to participate.
Okay. I will personally get in touch with you to see how.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Other questions? I just, again, want to ask about the rigor of the senior year, about how we can best
promote that so that so many of the high school students aren't going to school for half a day and doing goodness knows what else the other half of the day. And so I know that the dual credit, as we expand that into our high schools, is going to take a lot of that time. But if there's other, one of the things that I've talked about for a number of years that was not my idea, but I think it's a really good idea. It came from a former Katy school board member who now works for Houston Community College, and that is if there could be an indicator on the accountability system for high schools that have their students involved in some sort of rigor in their senior year. In other words, if I'm the high school principal and I have identified students that are absolutely finished with their coursework and there's no reason in the world why they can't go either physically go to a college and take courses or on my campus take courses, that's one set of students. The second set are those that aren't ready to go into college, and those students could get some sort of support system in place for developmental ed. And then the third group of students would be those that need to work or want to get work experience, want to have some sort of mentorship or internship. And so I'm the high school principal, and I have my hopefully 900 freshmen that are hopefully 900 seniors, right? Get that? So my 900 seniors now are all engaged in what is most appropriate for them. I'm real careful about not wanting to track kids and dump them into well, you aren't going to college or you aren't prepared. But whatever indicator, and if that could be a performance indicator for a high school, think what that could do for those students to keep them engaged in their high school throughout that senior year, or if they're ready, let them go to college and let them still be a high school student in some sort of early college program that's modeled after the ones that we have. It just seems like it would be incredible. So anyway, if you could pass that along, and I can't take credit for it, but I sure am promoting it. Any other questions?
Just to support that, something like that would really help principals in areas where the culture has grown up that senior year is not rigorous, and that culture is fiercely strong, and something like this would help.
It always has been. I mean, it has been for 40 years.
It's like putting a fake camera in your teenager's room, and he can tell everybody, well, my parents have a camera in my room, so got to do everything just right. You can't have any smoking or drinking.
Can you do that?
There's this term senioritis that just is rampant, or at least the high school that I went to.
Yeah.
And
that's not just your generation either.
Well, and I think part of it is that once you've been accepted to a 4-year university, especially if you did like early acceptance, so you get your letter like in November, you have five months where you, even if you are taking, if the school offers amazing courses, you're just kind of, you checked out.
There are solutions to this.
Yeah,
It's called rescinding acceptance if you don't.
Great.
I don't think students realize that, because I've lived exactly what you said with my own son a year ago. Don't worry, I've got the GPA, I've already made it, all AP classes, so they just stopped studying. And I saw that rampant in that senior group. But they don't realize that colleges do ask for that final transcript to see that difference.
Well, and I think from a student standpoint, like I had heard that, they could rescind it, but you didn't personally know anyone that happened to, so I mean,
Yeah, that kind of mitigates the effect of the policy.
And unfortunately, it would not be within FERPA to publish photos of all those students.
At the post office.
well, I mean, maybe do a better job of advertising, that schools really do rescind offers.
2 generations ago, there wasn't, the senior year was 11th grade, and there's really, that 12th grade is kind of in there for a reason. I mean, it's so that the 4x4, there's no way you can have a senioritis, year of not taking courses with the 4x4. That's in there for a reason. But clearly, for students that are college ready, they've taken their courses, they've taken, algebra and foreign language and science in the 8th grade, and by 11th grade, they don't have any more courses to take and they're college ready.
they should then begin their college work. And those, I mean, if the facts are still the same, that, 40 to 60% of entering freshmen still need developmental studies to get them in, college ready, then why not do it in the high school? It's got to be cheaper. It's got to be a way to do it. And I don't ever want to forget the workforce, because there are students that need to go from high school to work, clearly. And if there can be internships set up and jobs set up where they can gradually do that and go to school half a day or even not at all, that second semester of the senior year. But it just seems like we need to get there.
But still be counted within the school.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I think that's the whole thing, is creating having a creative program where the high school is still concerned and getting credit for what those students are doing.
Exactly. And that's why I said put it in the accountability system, so that, I mean, as it is now, high schools have some different indicators than elementary and middle, so that would just be another indicator. Just a thought.
And Madam Chair, I would like to say that we have just begun, we meaning TEA staff, just begun talking about a systemic approach to the rigor, and what we've done at the agency is kind of put all the, not all of them, but some of the major reform initiatives on a one-pager to look at when they were implemented and where we are with them and when kids graduate and those components of that. So keeping that in mind and looking at something systemic, meaning from pre-kindergarten to the transition to the workforce to college, careers, that, looking at that piece, what can we do as an agency in terms of putting support systems and resources in place for that? So we're starting that conversation.
Well, congratulations on all your hard work. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also say I wanted to thank Dr. Jackson personally, because we met with her team and the other assistant commissioners and that staff, I guess, about 3 weeks ago, to begin the dialogue, to work together as two agencies on issues that are common, that we're both, have playing fields on. And that really was a very, very lucrative time spent. And we're going to continue this probably on a 6-week basis. I think they've already talked about the next potential date.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move back to agenda item 2, consideration of adopting the minutes from the April 23rd, 2008 committee meeting. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes? So moved. Okay, moved by Ms. Mendoza, seconded by Dr. Phillips. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're moving now to agenda item 5, a presentation and discussion of college readiness standards, next steps, and timeline. Evelyn Hyatt, Senior Director of College Readiness Initiatives, will provide an overview of how the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board will address the objectives of diminishing the need for developmental education and increasing student success. Welcome back.
That's why I didn't leave, I just stayed. But, and I also want to introduce another of our TEA colleagues, Jessica Honick, who is who oversees the vertical teams at TEA, and we'll be talking about that as part of this presentation.
Great, thank you. Welcome.
Now we're going to see. This is really going to be a very brief overview of the college readiness standards and initiatives. And one of the things that Ms. Bricker brought up at one point is, she said, we've talked a lot about the standards. We want to know about all of the initiatives. And the thing that is, I think, important for us is that the standards are sitting at the centerpiece of almost all of the initiatives that we're doing. So we're going to be talking a lot about the standards, but I hope you'll see how it's interrelated to all of the many initiatives that we have that are part of this whole college readiness movement. We're also going to talk a little bit about our plans through 2011 and what we hope to accomplish and achieve. First of all, I want to go backwards a little bit and just remind you of the Phase 2 component that EPIC is doing right now. You will recall that we have college readiness special advisors on every single one of our public institutions, higher ed institutions, as well as 6 of our private institutions here in Texas. We asked them to give us the names of faculty who taught 18 of the entry-level courses. Some of these are courses that are part of the core. Others of them are courses that are necessary to pursue degrees like nursing, business, so they are in a sense gatekeeper courses for those professional degrees. And also, most of them are high enrollment courses, although some of them, like physics, are not really high enrollment, but they are part of that whole complement of entry-level science courses. I think that what happened with this whole Phase 2 process suggests what a wise decision it was for us to have the special advisors, because when we asked them for the names of professors and faculty members, they provided us with over 1,200 names. When they came for a meeting in April, we had only an 18% response rate. They got together with EPIC, that is overseeing the Phase 2 project, and we now have a 75% return rate. Over 900 faculty responded. Faculty had to submit a syllabus to EPIC. They submitted it online, and they also submitted a review of the college readiness standards in their area, telling what were the most critical to success in their course and what were the least critical for success, which means we probably now have more information than we've ever really had on entry-level courses in the field. If you go, I go to the next slide. This is the participation that we had in the Phase 2 study, and this was just to give you an indication. It's pretty much what you would expect in terms of those areas where we had the most participation, the Gulf Coast, the Metroplex, South Texas, where we have the most institutions. But you can see that we had very, very broad support for this effort. And the next steps that we are going to have in this is all of the responses we've gotten from the professors, both the syllabus and the response to the standards, are going to be analyzed by content experts, and selected staff will be asked to submit additional material, some of the assignments that they give, as well as some student exemplars. So we will have real examples of what college readiness looks like in these courses. And you are going to receive a report on this whole project at your October meeting. Dr. Dave Conley will be here to report on the results. But we're planning on taking these results and putting some of them on the website, so people will actually see what are good syllabus in areas, what are assignments that reflect college readiness, and what are some of the student exemplars of student readiness. So there's going to be a lot more information on what it really takes to be college ready, I think, than we've ever had before, and certainly I think what most states have at that level. That's not the final component for Phase 3, for the EPIC study. Phase 3 is going to take our standards and develop rubrics and sample student assignments that can be used either in high school seminars, and this goes back to what you were talking about with rigor in the senior year, or they could be used in developmental ed, or some of them could be used in entry-level courses. Again, the rubric is going to be the really telling component on this and how students do on the rubric. But this, again, I think reflects what Commissioner Scott said about the work that we're doing is probably the most exciting in state government right now, because you're going to see, I think, where you have that transition between high school and college and how we are trying to smooth that out. We also, during Phase 3 of the EPIC study, we're going back to what we did in Phase 2 for the academic courses, and we're doing them with the technical and vocational courses. We want to make certain that those are at college readiness and look at what they expect from students. And in those cases, we're really going to be looking at the cross-disciplinary skills. Again, that component that make the Texas college readiness standards unique among all of the states. So we will have a report for you on 11 of the technical vocational courses and what kind of assignments they have, what their syllabus looks like. And as an aside, we're also doing a Lexile study, a reading analysis of the textbooks that are used in these courses. So again, we're going to have a very full picture of what students are getting in their entry-level courses. And of course, we'll be providing professional development. The two agencies probably made a very slight error in our planning, because we have our phase 2, which you've heard about, and TEA has its phase 2, which you're about to hear about. Jessica, do you want to...
Closer to good afternoon. My name is Joseph Korhanik. I'm the director of the College Readiness Program at the Texas Education Agency. I'm very excited to be here today and give you some insight as to what TEA is doing as far as the College Readiness Program is concerned, and specifically what we're doing with Phase 2 of the program. We're transitioning from Phase 1 now that we have the adopted College Readiness Standards, but the first part of that transition was the obvious nomination process for the vertical teams in the 4 subject areas. We're near completion as far as the nomination process is concerned. To give you a little background on how that worked as far as TEA is concerned, we received statistically about 57% of our nominees from 3 regions within the state, and that being the Dallas area, Houston area, as well as the San Antonio area. We had about a total of 106 nominees submitted. We worked that down, obviously, to 6 nominees per subject area, 6 representing the secondary area, and obviously 4 will be representing higher ed. That was a rather rigorous process. We were very fortunate to have the expertise of our curriculum directors, math, science, social studies, and English. They were given a mechanism to look at all the nominees, make determinations based on credentials and so on and so forth, rate them, and then submit that to senior leadership. That process is now complete. We are very close to finalizing the names and solidifying that. We had a meeting last week with Evie Lynette, Anita Gibbons from the agency, and Sharon Jackson, and we looked over the higher ed nominees. So we're looking at representation issues, regional issues. As I indicated earlier, that we had a disproportionate number coming from 3 areas within the state. So we're accommodating for that right now as a group. So we should have that finished rather shortly, and we're ready to move on to the Phase 2 process, which is the gap analysis. Essentially, we're going to identify gaps between the newly adopted College Readiness Standards and the texts. We're looking at transitioning into math first, mathematics, then science, and very quickly into English language arts. And then social studies will follow. Obviously, the revision process for the social studies area is, farther down the line, so to speak, so we're going to address the immediate concerns, and that being mathematics, science, and English language arts. So that's where we stand as far as the gap analysis are concerned. That will be the team members getting together. They will be looking at the College Readiness Standards, obviously in the text, and making determinations as to where are the gaps, documenting that, putting that in a format, digestible format for all the concerned parties to see, and then making determinations there, and that would be submitted then to the State Board of Education for implementation as far as the texts are concerned. Now, the other part that I'm rather excited about is the Educator Support Web Portal. We're moving down the line on this. Our deadline to have a mechanism up and running, at least a mock mechanism up and running, is August 31st. Now, the motivation behind this is essentially to provide a single focal point as far as getting this information out to the field. And when I say the field, I'm addressing teachers, administrators, students, parents, and other concerned parties and partners, which is the coordinating board's partners as well. Essentially, it's set up to provide a historical background as far as this process is concerned. Obviously, phase one is complete. A lot of information is compiled. We have in product, we have the college readiness standards. We also have a lot of documentation that goes along with that process. We currently have documentation referring to, or historical documentation referring to House Bill 1, the rules that apply to House Bill 1, and so on and so forth. And all this information needs to be out there for the public to digest and form a better understanding of how this process evolved over time. There also will be a Q&A piece. I'm sure in the near future that there will be a lot of questions being presented as far as how this process will be implemented at the classroom level. What are the long-term implications of this implementation, and so on and so forth. So we will be providing information such as that. And that will definitely be a collaboration between the coordinating board and TEA. There will be news and updates as far as presentations, news and updates as far as implementation process, as far as phase 3 is concerned, which I won't delve into too deeply, but I do have it up there. And phase 3 is part of the instructional strategies piece, which is a component of House Bill 1, and we are going to have to address that also rather shortly. But we need to provide a mechanism so people can see how House Bill 1 is going to be implemented, and so on and so forth. And then finally, professional development piece, which is also a part of House Bill 1. The system probably will support professional development on a large scale. Why is that important? Well, in order to ensure that these standards are being implemented in the classroom and the strategies are being addressed, there needs to be a professional development piece. And whenever there's text revision is involved, there's always a professional development piece. The teachers are exposed to the new standards, and then they're also exposed to the implementation of those new standards. So the House Bill 1 provides us some pretty significant timelines, or milestones, I should say. The first milestone that we need to be cognizant of is English language arts. September 1st, 09, we have to have the college readiness instructional materials in the classrooms. So there has to be a PD piece prior to that occurring. So it is our hope at this point that this website can act as a mechanism to ensure or help, or act as a catalyst to help this process move along. And we can meet these milestones. Math will be September 1st, 2010. And then subsequently, social studies and science will be September 1st of 2011. So there's some timelines there that we're going to address, but we are in constant communication. We're working diligently to make sure that these timelines are met, and I'm excited about the process. And I'm here to answer any questions if you do have any questions.
Questions? Yes. Line?
You mentioned our phase 2 is going in and looking at the developmental course of ranking, all the faculty ranking, the readiness standards, what place support, what's not. And then EPIC has done a and see.
Thanks, Trent. And see what
adjustments need to be made, I imagine. At the same time, TEA is taking a look at these standards and doing their gap analysis. So which standards are they going to look at? The ones that have already passed, or the ones that have been tweaked by EPIC because the faculty members have made their adjustments and inputs and recommendations?
We don't anticipate that there are going to be adjustments made in the overarching standards. You might recall that there were 4 levels to the standards. It could be that when you reach the 3rd and the 4th level that you're going to see some changes. But again, if there are major inconsistencies, then we would have to come back to the board, and that would have to be...
I'm curious to hear if there's a lot of zeros in terms of the ranking of what's the most important by the faculty members. They were going to rank them, and some of them were less important than others.
I think what they found, and I hate to talk about it before they've really done their full analysis,
right,
but it's that there's an awful lot of things that are most important that they are not necessarily seeing reflected in all of the syllabus. I mean, the professors think it's important, but some of them are not including examples of that or indications of that in their syllabus. And that's the purpose of doing the of selecting those that are both reflecting it in their syllabus and say it's important, and getting that information and putting it online.
So the standards remain the baseline, and the feedback
Correct.
mechanism is back to the professors and their syllabi versus the syllabi driving changes in the standard.
Correct.
Okay, that's a huge difference that I've...
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Thanks. Commissioner?
One thing we need to do, and we've talked about this informally before, is we need to have one element of our strategy to support college readiness standards has to be working with deans of schools of education.
Yes, and if I may continue, we have two major goals. One is to increase awareness and stress the importance to community members, to parents, and to students so that they really understand what the college readiness are. And the second is to build capacity among faculty to support student achievement. And that really rests with what we're going to be doing with teachers, or with faculty from prep programs, and I'll tell you that in a moment. But first, on increasing the awareness, and this is where you see all the components that are under P16 coming together. We are planning on using P16 councils to promote college readiness. We're having regional meetings of faculty and community leaders coming up in the fall, and we're also going to be having meetings for deans of colleges of education at that time. We are continuing to use our special advisors, and we are developing an e-newsletter for college, both for the special advisors and for chief academic officers, and to be put up on our web. I think what you were talking about earlier in this meeting reflects that you really have to have a broad communication strategy and plan if you're really going to get the word out and make certain everybody has it. In terms of building capacity support, and I do want to just say that Susan Barnes has now become Senior Director of Educator Prep, and we're really happy about that. But one of the things we're going to be doing is creating educator preparation faculty groups to talk about the college readiness standards and make certain that they are integrated into the relevant coursework for educator prep programs. Another thing we're going to be doing, of course, is collaborating with TEA on in-service programs so that the teachers who are currently in the field are updated and aware of what's happening. Our recommendations are that we request additional funding so that we can continue to promote and support the efforts of P16. Then we have to start scaling up. We've been seeing some promising practices relating to college readiness, and I think this is where you see a lot of our smaller programs right now in the area of educator prep. We are just starting our math, science, technology teacher academies. We have the project we talked about earlier to train teachers for teaching dual enrollment and infusing the college readiness standards into that. And we also are including it in the teacher quality grants. So our next job is really looking at what's been successful and scaling up those activities. And then we also want to be scaling up those college readiness programs like the high school summer bridge and things of that nature that impact developmental ed and adult basics, so that we are not just focusing in on the college readiness, but also student success once they get to college. So we are aware of that. We are working to start a real campaign to make certain everybody's aware of the college readiness standards and that they are starting to infuse them into those college ed prep programs.
If I might add also, Dr. Barnes has also been in contact with TACTI, and I think she'll be meeting with them in the very, very near future. TACTI is the association of all the deans of colleges of teacher education here in Texas. And I might want to add to that, if I could, I have been in meeting with Jan Fries, the executive director of the Texas Counseling Association, and she is also going to be working with us to also take those college readiness standards into the preparation programs for college counselors. So that also becomes, I just met with her yesterday, and so we're going to be working really fast on that. So I just wanted to add that because that was after the slide was done.
Do you all see as any kind of obstacle as the state board would adopt standards for text and textbooks, the college readiness standards maybe trying to catch up and interface at the same time. I know that one is 2009, one is 2010, and I understand that, but it seems that as textbooks are adopted, for example, at a significant cost, that we want to make sure that they include readiness standards as well. Do you see that as a problem or a challenge?
Well, whenever you have tight timelines, there's always going to be challenges, and the textbook issue is foreseen as a possible challenge. But social studies is obviously, we have some time to work with social studies and science. ELA was recently adopted, so we're working on following the timeline as far as the CRS instructional materials are concerned, and we're having discussion with leadership and such as to the nature of those instructional materials and how that will impact the adoption process or the process that's in place, and how maybe we can come up with a mechanism to get that information out there, because it does say in the statute that there's an online component as far as these constructional materials are concerned, and there may be opportunities there to pursue it with the web portal to provide online assistance as far as how the standards align or do not align with the text, and how to adjust for that, how to come up with strategies to adjust for that within the classroom. So all this discussion is underway, and it's part of our chart system. There's massive charts, and there's all these obstacles or milestones that we need to address, and we're always constantly looking at.
That's right. So, Joseph, you're saying that your gap analysis will include the textbooks?
Well, not necessarily the textbook. We're going to be focusing solely on the text, which the textbook should reflect.
The textbook should reflect the text.
Correct.
I agree that they should, but will you make sure that they do?
I don't have that power.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have it. Yeah, they did. Susan said yes. Didn't want to be easy on you.
I understand.
Any other questions or comments?
This is probably more for TEA, but I know we're looking at the secondary education piece at this point. What are the plans to continue taking these readiness standards and either bringing, from P up or going down the pipeline?
Going down the pipeline is back to primary.
Yes.
And, well, obviously if you look at the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills within the disciplines, for example, ELA, you see that there's a subject-based and there's progression within the ELA standards, and that there's some repetitive in terms of basic skills. And Commissioner Paredes said writing is very important, obviously, and there's a sequential nature in terms of learning the ability and having the skills to write effectively and on multiple levels, creative versus technical and so on and so forth. So, in my mind, that's part of the instructional strategies piece, because there's some generational components there that need to be addressed. And I'm sure with the data that's being collected with EPIC and what is being needed at the post-secondary level, that will then inform the phase 3 piece when we're reflecting back on strategies and how they need to be addressed on multiple levels within the classroom.
And the text obviously it's built upon one, from elementary to middle to high, so obviously that will be taken down that pathway, I imagine.
There are mechanisms in place to look at the different levels of the text. Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Very exciting.
Agenda item 6 is consideration of recommendation to the board on the feasibility study for restructuring state student financial aid programs in Texas, House Bill 1, General Appropriations Act, Rider 49, page 111 through 54, 80th Texas Legislature. Lois Hollis, Senior Assistant to the Deputy Commissioner for Business and Finance, has a presentation on this item, and there will be public comment following the presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. One thing I want to point out, you've got a handout, and it's in this pretty purple color that gives you some acronyms, because financial aid is fraught with acronyms, and we thought it might be helpful, just to have a little cheat sheet as we go through this. You're welcome. One other thing I want to point out is you also have new blue pages, and your new blue page says adoption. The previous one said no action, and you all do have to adopt this with or without changes. So, important thing. Okay, before we get started, if it's okay, I would like to recognize 3 members of the audience that we have. They were steering committee members that helped with this report. We've got Ron Brown from Mary Hardin Baylor, Rick Renshaw from Dallas County Community College, and Carol McDonald from ICA. So they were all very helpful in putting this information together for us. So with that, what I want to do is find this and go through the recommendations with you. What I want to do is remind you about the scope of the study, because the scope of the study was very limited. What it asked us to look at, and what we hired Higher Education Insight Associates to look at, was whether or not the FAFSA, the free application for financial aid, should be required for admission. Should Texas Grant and other student aid programs all be combined into one big program? Should the programs at the institutions that they get from set-asides from tuition revenues be put into Texas Grant? Should Texas Grant be indexed to room and board? So, because for one, tuition and fees rise at a rapid rate, and does room and board rise at a lower rate? And number 2, if you did that, could the tuition tax credits be used by families who receive Texas Grant? And then, should Texas Grant be dispersed as a stipend so that also possibly families could use the tuition tax credits? Should financial aid in the state be dispersed through a debit card, a statewide debit card? And should we add merit components to Texas Grant? And if so, what should those merit components be? What was the role and scope of Be On Time, the Be On Time program? And then should we collapse smaller programs into a larger program? So with that, I forget I have control. Let me just remind you that the study was done with the goals of closing the gaps in mind, with the participation success goals, and the mantra was giving the right money to the right student at the right time. I've got the principles up there, but and I'll let you read them, I will not read them to you. What I've done in organizing this is tried to group the different recommendations into 6 different groups. The first one is aligning all the programs. Second is helping families and students. Third is adding a merit component. Fourth is maintaining the programs as they are. The 5th is changing the programs, and then administrative issues. So the first recommendation is part of aligning, which says keep Texas Grant as the cornerstone program. Texas Grant has done a great job of blending need and merit. The students who are graduating with Texas Grants graduate and persist at higher rates than other low-income students. So it's been a very successful program. So use this as a model for what we want to do. And the name, we've got a lot of name recognition out there. Recommendations 2, 3, 5, and 10 all deal with aligning Texas Grant, the TEG, the Tuition Equalization Grant Program, and TEOG, the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant Program. Aligning the eligibility requirements, aligning allocation formulas, just finding ways so that we have one big program. But the caveat is, for TEOG, which is for students attending public 2-year colleges, look at what the impact of that would be if you put it in and align its criteria with Texas Grant. Is TEOG being used to serve students who are taking certificate programs who might not qualify under Texas Grant requirements? So what we want to make sure of is, if we align TEOG, is it the right thing? Are we still going to be closing the gaps in participation success if we do that? The other thing is, these should be long-term goals. This should start with students entering high school in 2009 and graduating in 2013, so that the students, if we add a merit component, they know what the expectations are. They can plan for them throughout their high school career. And it also gives us time to make sure that we increase funding enough so that we can add non-traditional students into the pipeline. Right now, TEG and TEOG serve non-traditional students. Texas Grant really does not. So we need to find a pipeline for getting those students into the Texas Grant program. The next set of recommendations, which is also, number 10, is another recommendation for how to get students into the Texas Grant program once we merge these. And I'm not keeping up with my slides, I'm sorry. I have control and I still can't do it. What Higher Education Insight Associates recommended was that there be 3 ways for a student to enter Texas Grant. They could earn an associate's degree, which is one of the current ways you can get into Texas Grant, or you could complete 12 hours of transferable general education credit with a 3.0 GPA, or 24 hours of transferable general education and major specific course credit with a 3.0 GPA. When we presented all of this also to the commissioner, and in discussions with him, you'll notice his recommendation is a little bit different. Still earn an associate's degree, but complete 24 hours of transferable coursework with a GPA of 3.0. It's just kind of merging the two, because really, you can't tell what kind of success a student's going to have after 12 hours. After 24, you have a good idea, and also, most institutions won't take only 12 hours of transferable credit. You have to have at least 24. So this is what we would recommend that you adopt instead of HIA's recommendation. Recommendations 8 and 9 deal with adding a merit component to Texas Grant, and HIA's recommendations are that students take the recommended high school curriculum, but in addition score a 1350 or above in the new scoring for the SAT, or an 18 or above on the ACT, and it's doing one of these 3 things. Or they rank in the top 50% of their high school graduating class, or complete the Distinguished Achievement program. And I'll go ahead and tell you number 9, and then we'll go into what the commissioner's recommendations are. Recommendation number 9 is have a one-time merit component of $1,000 for anybody who takes the Distinguished Achievement program. And it could be for books, room and board, supplies, whatever, but maybe this could act as an incentive for students to take the more rigorous curriculum. So the commissioner's recommendations are a little bit different. For one, not only completing the Distinguished Achievement program, but adding the IB, International Baccalaureate program, because that's just as rigorous as the DAP. Next is completing the recommended high school curriculum, but because we're emphasizing so much college readiness, make sure that the scores on the SAT and the ACT are the college readiness scores. We want to make sure that the kids are prepared and ready to learn when they enter higher education. Next, instead of graduating in the top 50% of your high school graduating class, it would be graduating in the top 30% of the high school graduating class. And then he added a 4th one, which is great. He's being very optimistic that we will have a high school GPA ready to go, a standardized GPA, and so it would be a 3.0 on a 4-point GPA scale. So it's doing any one of those 4 criteria plus the recommended curriculum would get you into the Texas Grant program. And especially now, since the recommended high school curriculum is the default curriculum, we need to find a way to raise that bar. And the only change to recommendation number 9 that was made was for that $1,000 incentive bonus, allow students to take either the Distinguished Achievement program or the IB program.
In taking the IB program, would they have to sit for the IB exam or just complete the
Because there's a whole lot of difference in taking IB courses and
sitting for the exam.
Yeah.
And we hadn't talked about the specifics, but I think taking the courses is the main part of the rigor, the curriculum. And not just, oh, good, I got the nod from
Wasn't an expert in IB.
Thank you. Okay. So.
It's been validated.
Yes. Makes me feel a lot better. Okay, so that's the answer to your question. They would just need to take the coursework, not sit for the exam.
No, they have to sit for the exam.
They would have to sit for the exam. Oh, I was not validated, then I will defer to the expert. Yes. Okay, next recommendations for families and students, recommendations 4 and 12. Make sure that the least advantaged students from the families in the lowest 3 income quintiles receive the majority of aid. So we're talking about students from families with incomes of $62,000 or less. Target the funds to those students. And then increase awareness of the Texas Grant Program and come up with a Texas Grant estimator for students and families, and maybe have some more money in the program, so that students can go out on the website, enter some information. They say, okay, based on your information, you're likely to get this much of a Texas grant, or you're not likely to get a Texas grant. Something we can build in with a financial aid estimator that we're working on right now.
For the data.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, Commissioner.
One point, and right currently, the bulk of Texas grant funding goes to students in the 2 lowest quintiles, correct?
Correct.
So that this represents our concern, and this is something that has been raised here at the board meetings as well as among members of the state legislature, the governor's office. We need to do something to reach more students in middle class income groups who still suffer significantly when they send youngsters to college.
Exactly. And part of this too goes back to the aligning of Texas Grant and TEG, aligning award amounts. Right now, the amount that TEG recipients get in the lowest quintiles is less than what a Texas Grant recipient receives. They get $31,33 plus another $1,500. Student attending a university gets $51.70. And so part of it would be raising the amount that these students get attending private institutions too. Okay. Next, maintain some of the programs. For instance, the tuition set-aside program, TPEG is one of the programs, and then the designated tuition set-asides. Keep those funds at the institutions because they are serving mainly non-traditional middle-income students, and the institutions have a lot of flexibility with these programs to be able to direct them to students who may not be getting other forms of financial aid. Next is maintain the Be On Time program for what it is, a program targeted towards traditional college students coming in right out of high school who live on campus, who plan to go straight through. Right now, only 1 in 6 students nationwide are what we think of as typical college students. And so we don't really want to expand this program a lot, and especially not at the expense of the Texas Grant Program. So maintain it, fund it enough to serve these students, but have it serve these students. The other recommendation is, instead of, one of the things we talked about was, do you centralize financial aid? Do you have the coordinating board get in all the data from the FAFSA, decide who gets money, and then send it out, which is a huge process. It's called centralized financial aid administration. It takes lots of computer support, lots of people support. Most states are moving away from a centralized process to a decentralized process. We currently have a decentralized process. So the idea is keep it that way, but do some things that mimic a centralized process so that students around the state are treated equally. Have a common FAFSA deadline. Say it's June 1st. Everybody who gets their FAFSA filed by June 1st and, is within this income group, you'll receive a Texas grant. If there are funds left over, then students, as institutions have funds left over, then they can award students after that time. Find a more uniform allocation methodology. We have 3 different allocation methodologies for 3 different programs. We can find a way to design an allocation methodology that works for all 3 programs. And then base the Texas grant on actual tuition and fees. Right now, the Texas grant, if you attend an institution that charges less than the average tuition and fees, you get that extra money to use for other educational costs, which is great, but with limited funds, that's knocking other students out of being eligible. So limit it to tuition fees so everybody knows their tuition fees are covered, but then use that other money to fund more students. Recommendations 11 and 15 are some program changes, and it's something I just talked about. Align the renewal criteria. Oh, no, this isn't one I talked about. Align the renewal criteria for Texas grant with the renewal criteria for federal student aid, which currently that criteria is usually a 2.0 GPA with a 75% completion rate. And I'm going to go to the next slide, and then I'll come back to this one. And recommendation 11, the commissioner's recommendation is to keep the renewal criteria the same as it is now. Right now, the renewal criteria for Texas grant is the school's satisfactory academic progress requirement for the first year, and then for each year after that, it's a 2.5 GPA. It's completion of 24 semester credit hours and a 75% completion rate. And really, with limited funds, it's hard to broaden that criteria. And everybody knows, all the students know what the expectations are. They've been out there since the beginning. So we need to have some form of a merit component there. While this isn't, difficult to achieve, most students should be able to achieve it, and knowing what the criteria is up front, there shouldn't be an issue. Okay. Going back to program changes, recommendation 15 is to collapse some of the smaller programs into 2 programs. One would be a workforce development program for areas of the state, or for professions in the state that are in need of workers, teachers, nurses, engineers. And then another would be to have a college readiness program, something like what Indiana does with their 21st Century Scholars Program. It makes an early commitment. It says, okay, in 8th grade, if you show financial need and you do these things, by the time you get to college, we'll have money waiting for you. And they've had very good success with that. It's got an outreach component, and they work with families and parents, and those students really do what they need to do, and they know beginning in 8th grade they're going to college. So that's the recommendation for that. Next, the last 2, I call them administrative recommendations, and one has to do with, if we don't have, the Texas grant amount is based on average tuition and fees for the upcoming year. We are to publish those by January 31st. Most institutions don't know how much they're going to charge in tuition and fees by that time. So this is saying, if we don't know and the institutions don't want to estimate, we'll use the national average for increases for 4-year institutions, for 2-year institutions, and calculate the grant amount based on those awards. The last recommendation is make sure we have a good accountability system in place. Texas grant, the performance measures we have for that, we look at persistence rates and graduation rates, which are very important. We need to look at the other programs and make sure that we have everything we need in place to make sure that these programs are effective and efficient in serving the students that we intend to serve. So with that, that's all I have, and I'm glad to answer any questions. We have 2 people who would like to speak. Rick Renshaw from Dallas County Community College. and Carol McDonald from ICA.
Okay, do you all want to ask questions first or hear from our two speakers? Whichever. Okay, why don't we go ahead and hear from our speakers? Any particular order?
I know Rick has a flight ticket.
Okay, then let's take Rick first.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, and members of the committee and board, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Rick Renshaw, and I've administered financial aid to hundreds of thousands of students over the past 24 years as a financial aid director. I currently serve about 28,000 community college students at my current institution. It was my privilege for the past several months to participate on the steering committee for the feasibility study for restructuring state student financial aid programs in Texas. And I commend the 80th Texas legislature for funding this study and its commitment to helping thousands of Texas students receive the benefit of a college education. The report that Higher Education Insight Associates presented to the board on April 22nd lays the foundation for a good roadmap to developing a more coordinated array of financial aid programs for Texas students. In building on that foundation, I urge this committee and the board to look closely at the significant and defining differences in the various sectors of higher education in Texas, and to move with caution in considering each of the recommendations coming out of this study. One size does not fit all when designing a financial aid system to meet the needs of our state's divergent student population. I found strong support among my colleagues for the opening recommendation of the study. The Texas Grant Program should remain the cornerstone program of our state financial aid system. However, in maintaining the premier status of the Texas Grant Program, the other recommendations that propose aligning the criteria and the eventual merging of the TEOG program with the Texas Grant Program fail to recognize the fundamentally different needs of the student populations served by the community and technical colleges with those served by the universities. In my written response to the recommendations, I expressed concerns that proposals for the merging of the major grant programs into the Texas Grant Program fail to acknowledge that there cannot be one definition of academic success for all students in the higher education pipeline. That's especially true for students seeking higher education goals at the community college level. The recommendations also do not account for the foundational differences in the channels of access that students need to successfully enter the pipeline. I encourage this committee and the board to carefully consider the suggestion in recommendation number 2 of the study that proposes an evaluation of the TEOG and the TEG programs to determine the viability of aligning the criteria and or the merging of the major grant programs. Please remember that the community colleges comprise over half of the public undergraduate student population in our state and only receive about 1/8 of the state's financial aid awards. To achieve the goals of closing the gaps, the community colleges will continue to be the primary gateway for the majority of students seeking access to higher education in Texas. Any changes to the state financial aid system as a result of this study should include in the design a program that increases access, participation, and success for the community college students as defined, as those goals are defined for the community college students.
Thank you very much. I'm going to wait and let Carol McDonald speak before we have questions. So if you'll just kind of stick around. What time is your flight?
It's not for 2:40.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully we'll be done.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm always happy to be before you, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you. I do want to make some comments about the recommendations, and I will point out that my comments may be just a little bit off because the recommendations have changed from the last time that I saw them, and so I may say some things that are not quite what you heard a few minutes ago from Ms. Hollis. I also want to emphasize that you usually see me in an advocacy role. I'm either usually saying do this or don't do that. And I want to begin by saying that ICUT is not taking a position of either support for or opposition to these recommendations, but we do want to suggest that you not rush into endorsing them. There are some very good things about these recommendations. Consolidating the small programs into a workforce program makes a whole lot of sense. Adding sunset provisions to new programs, that's a very good idea because we've got this huge proliferation that occurred because we didn't have something like that. Maintaining the Be On Time program for students who can be encouraged to enroll full-time, that also makes a lot of sense. And aligning the renewal criteria for Texas Grant with satisfactory academic progress standards for the Pell Grants and institutional programs is also, I think, something that bears consideration. Developing an eligibility pathway for needing non-traditional students and students who are independent of their parents for Texas Grant by earning an associate's degree or some number of hours of transferable credits is a good thing, although it is important that this pathway is a significant, and it is a significant improvement over what we've got now, which is just the associate's degree. But it's also important that we point out that these recommendations don't address the financial aid these students often need to gain access to the community college to begin with. And that has got to be addressed, particularly when you're talking about non-traditional older students. We also believe that there's some very interesting ideas in these recommendations having to do with including a merit component as a criterion for gaining access to state student financial aid. Now, a number of states have attempted to add these kinds of components to their grant programs ever since Georgia created the HOPE program way back when. And almost all of them have had some unintended consequences that were not really good things. For example, in its first form, Georgia's HOPE program helped a larger proportion of middle-income students than it did low-income students. And that's because the B average was what was required to gain new access to the program. And GPA is highly related to family income. Because lower-income students didn't have in as great a numbers the B average that was required, they didn't gain access to the program. So this became a very good way of keeping affluent students in Georgia to go to Georgia's universities when they had generally been leaving Georgia to go to other states for universities. But it didn't really close the gaps for low-income students. Second thing that Georgians learned is that students changed their behavior in high school to gain B averages. They began avoiding the most challenging courses in order to be sure that they had a B average to go to college. And as a result, when they got to college, they lost their HOPE scholarships because they didn't really have the preparation needed to get and maintain a B average in college. This caused the Georgia legislature to go back and add preparation requirements to the HOPE scholarship program. One goal of many merit programs is to increase the number of students enrolling in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Just last month, a preliminary study of Florida's Bright Futures program suggested that since the program began, the opposite has occurred. While it's true that the recipients of Bright Futures scholarships enroll in STEM fields in higher rates than non-recipients, there has been an overall decrease in STEM major enrollment. This suggests that students are leaving rigorous fields in order to maintain the GPA required to keep their scholarships, thus again creating an unintended consequence. And so far, Texas has dodged most of the serious mistakes that other states have made in creating a financial aid program and adding merit to their programs. The Texas Grant has always emphasized preparation to college as opposed to a specific GPA. That in turn encouraged students to take college prep curriculum in record numbers. It is one of the reasons why your consultants referred to the Texas Grant program as, quote, the student aid program of the future. And I'm sure we don't want to see anything done that reduces the progress that we have been making by creating new unintended consequences. Now, I said before that there were some interesting merit features to the proposals you have before you. Multiple options for demonstrating merit are required for access to financial aid is really an interesting idea. Using test scores or class rank or completion of a particular curriculum allows students the opportunity to qualify where their strength is. I think we could all debate what cutoff scores we wanted to pick, what rank in high school might, and whether or what curriculums might be required as an advanced curriculum. But it's all a very interesting approach to this, and I think gives students more options. The idea that if merit is required for access to financial aid, the criteria for grant renewal should be the same as the Pell Grant is also interesting in that it gives the students who will struggle the most or who take very demanding courses where grading is typically more difficult than it may be in the liberal arts the best chance of retaining their financial aid. The merit components and their possible consequences vary for low-income students, and that highlights the tension between the participation and success objectives that you have on this board. Rather than support or oppose the recommendations of this report, ICUT is in the process of collecting a significant amount of data on individual students of the cohort who enrolled in ICUT institutions as first-time entering students in the fall of 2007 and received state financial aid. We are collecting over 24 separate pieces of data on each of those students for the academic year that has just ended. When we analyze this data, we will know the impact of some of these suggestions on a real cohort of students. We will know if various income groups are affected differently, if one ethnic group fares better than another, which students are most likely or least likely to meet the criteria that have been established. And at that point, we will have some clear indication if adopting these recommendations will, in fact, help close the gaps or not. Essentially, ICUT is volunteering to be your canary in the coal mine. Our institutions are a microcosm of the larger group of institutions in Texas. We have 2- and 4-year institutions. We have urban, rural, and suburban campuses. We have institutions whose admissions are highly selective, those that are just competitive, I shouldn't just say just competitive, but are competitive, and those who practice open enrollment policies. We include historically black colleges and Hispanic serving institutions. If there are going to be negative effects of these recommendations, they will show up in this data. And if those effects are positive, they will also show up. And in fact, we are likely to be, whatever we find is likely to be magnified in the larger mix of public institutions. We simply suggest that you wait to endorse these ideas until you have some real data. We are prepared to meet with you again as a committee or meet with you one-on-one if that's necessary after our data collection deadline has passed and we've done our analysis. Just to give you some perspective of what that timeline is, we'll have to do one more set of corrections to reflect the changes in the recommendations as we've seen them today. We'll probably send that out to the financial aid offices next week. It will probably take us about 3 weeks to collect the data. So we're hoping that by the middle of July we will have an analysis of our data and be ready to present it to them.
Thank you very much. Great input from both of you as always. What is our timeline as far as implementation? I mean, are we able to wait? Is it a recommendation that we don't wait? What is our timeline?
What you need to do today is adopt the program adopt their report with the changes or without changes, or you can adopt it pending information from ICUT. Yes. And then, that'll be your recommendation to the full board. And if for some reason the data is not ready, the full board could give that authority to the chair and vice chair, or the chair and vice chair of this committee to do.
Okay. And one other thing that I wanted to add, I wanted to particularly thank Dr. Phillips for asking the coordinating board to get in touch with Senator Ellis's office. That was critical. And I mean, he is the father of Texas grants, and it's very, very important that he is, being kept in the loop every step of the way, so thank you for that.
He called me yesterday, and we had a nice chat.
Good.
And he's very interested.
I think he would be. Right. Brenda? I was just questioning, you are required today to adopt with changes or to adopt pending information, or it's...
That's how we posted it in the Texas Register, and the full board needs a recommendation from you all.
Okay. So we can have the option of deferring on the item too, can't you?
Yes, yes, you sure can.
Let me ask one other question. We have to send a report to the legislature at a time certain.
Right.
Does the report require recommendations that are adopted by the board, or could it?
That's a good question.
What really is required, because you do have a specific date.
Right.
Which is what?
Which is September 21st.
That it's due to the legislature.
Actually, it's due, this one's due August 1st. We got an extension from July 1st.
Okay, I guess I'm looking at...
You're looking at the other report.
The writers.
But at any rate, it is due over there, so you have that requirement.
Right, we do have to submit it. It can be submitted saying, you know, the board hasn't fully analyzed these, and we will get back to you with, you know, what our recommendations are. So that, yes, that's another option.
Did you have a follow-up? I did, I'm sorry, and I'm not on the committee, but
That's quite all right.
But obviously, this is such a huge, important issue, and it seems to me, I mean, on the surface, you know, and certainly the commissioner's recommendations seem sound. I mean, you have, you know, just looking at number 8, 4 that you can pick from, and again, that plays to student strengths and so on. When I'm sitting back, I'm kind of questioning, you know, before I make a major decision, you know, I'd like to see the played out results in terms of this is our recommendation because this is what we anticipate based on what we know today, because we know things will change, but based on what we know today, what the outcome will be in the future, and that's 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 20 years. Without, you know, in other words, I need to understand the outcome before I can make a decision. Do we have that information? I know we have a lot of material here, but I'm having a little bit of trouble finding it.
A lot of the information that you're looking for the consultant's recommendation it's in their report.
Where is it?
There's some appendices that give you the data and statistics.
Right, but the models haven't been run.
Right, there have been no models run, exactly.
And that was my point. Where is the outcome that's in the report?
Well, let me respond in a couple of ways. First of all, let's think about the GPA requirement. Since there's no uniform GPA requirement, since there's no uniform way for calculating it, we don't know what the outcome will be until we have one and we collect data. 3.0 GPA, as you know, is usually the cutoff point to denote merit in education, not just public education, but higher education. So until we have a standardized method for calculating GPA, we can't predict the results. The way we address that issue is to have multiple ways of measuring merit. And that's what Jill was talking about. We certainly have data on SAT scores, on ACT scores, so that you could see what a cut score might be and how many students that would include and how many would eliminate. But some of these we haven't done before.
Yeah, and I understand that it's easier said than done, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I would assume that some level of modeling would be appropriate in terms of basing this recommendation. And believe me, I understand what you're saying, but again, it goes back to, you know, making a decision without understanding the outcome and not even taking a best guess on that outcome, and frankly tying it in directly as we can to closing the gaps. I mean, if I said, yes, I want to vote yes on all of your recommendations, where is that going to take us in terms of closing the gaps? I just don't think I have that that information in front of me.
No, you're right.
I suggest a possibility. I mean, what Raymond said is absolutely correct in terms of some of the data we don't have.
Right.
But the commissioner has suggested that through the think tank, this contract be amended to address some further issues in terms of affordability. Now, we haven't talked about this directly, but I can see that it would be feasible to look at that process and see about developing the model that would, while it wouldn't be, it'd be more predictive than the reality, but could look at some of these various things, including what Carol had mentioned in terms of impact on changes in what people major in. I should note that there is a national trend towards reduction in STEM field majors in general, so I don't know how they accounted for that. But we could look at, when that contract is amended, to develop some of those specific things in more detail and connecting to closing the gaps, as he suggests, if that's what people would like to do.
What our data analysis will do for you is give you a snapshot of one entering group of students and how it affected them. And we will adapt it to the series of recommendations we've heard today. And right now, the things that we're collecting add up to 24 different items on every student in the group.
Would you like to also be in charge of our student data record? Did the vendor not provide that as part of the study? Were they not required to provide that, or they do have the modeling information, it's just not in the...
No, they don't have the modeling. There wasn't time. It was a very quick study. It began in November.
Right there.
They had to have...
But how can you support the recommendations without a model?
Now, what they've done is they've gone back and said, okay, we've looked at national data, we've looked at your Texas data. Based on those things, here's what we think, and based on talking to policymakers too.
Yeah, the problem is, and then I'll be quiet, but the problem is, here's what we think. Well, I want to know. You know, I don't want to think, yes, perhaps this is a good recommendation. I guess just for me, I need a little more comfort factor. We're talking about affecting, you know, the students in Texas, and I just think we need a little more. So thank you for...
Oh, absolutely. She was basically saying everything I was thinking, except much more eloquently.
Yeah, actually, I was comforted in the fact that in the package it said no action required, and I think I missed the memo somewhere that said action required, and I apologize if it went out and through all of our crazy emails, because it said no action required, and I believe somewhere in this report it says next steps is to model the recommendations that were given. So I felt better about that. I thought we were going to discuss, we were going to listen, we were going to hear, we were going to think, and then at a later date we were going to have some analysis like we did when we did our funding. Okay? That sort of analysis in order to really feel good about the direction we were going. And so I am not prepared to support the recommendations at this point. I think we've got to see what it looks like, maybe even using not just the 2007 cohort, but let's track it, let's put it in place in further years to see what would have happened, at least going a little bit backwards in order to go forward. But I think it's very complex. I think, to Brenda's point, I mean, we're talking about huge impacts to our student population, and there's other questions that we have to figure out. What are the unintended consequences that might happen? So I'm sorry if I missed the memo about it being an action item.
Well, that was the first thing I asked when I sat down.
No one knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's an issue. Big issue. Set that aside. Other than that, I think we need to have some sort of, even if it's rudimentary, a basic baseline model for some of the impacts on some of these recommendations. So I don't know, I can move to table. I can move to, what? I can move back to San Antonio? What? Exactly what would you like me to do next?
It's too long to drive there.
Girl, you're telling me.
Get on the road at 5 p.m.
Ms. Ricker?
Yes.
And I think this is in the report, but the writer, and I'll read from the last line here, says the coordinating board shall report the findings of the study to the governor and the LBB by July 1st, and as Rose has indicated, because of the board meeting, we asked for a August 1st.
Well, does the findings of the report mean the findings of the report, or the findings of the report and recommendations?
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be recommendations.
So, we've got a lot of findings.
So if in fact we could,
Incomplete findings.
right, if in fact we could incorporate the information that Carol and ICUT will have for us, and if in fact we can get the information that we've asked for as far as how these current students will be impacted and maybe move it into the future and make some predictors. I'm thinking in terms of, I can remember Senator Ellis calling board members, school board members. When did this Texas grants? 2099. I can remember the phone call saying that we've got this money out there, and there aren't near enough students that are trying to access it. Please do whatever you can to. Yeah, they had money that wasn't being used. So now we have the opposite problem, and there are a lot of unintended consequences that I see in this. I think that we're absolutely moving in the right direction. I love the fact that there is some accountability on the student's part, and I also like that there's some options of whether it's grade point average or it's SAT scores or ACT and others, recommended curriculum, distinguished program. But I too would like to see how this plays out with this current class, how it interfaces with TEG and the community college and the Texas grants, and how I would hate to say that we're going to take one out at the expense of another, and that could, I think, happen if we don't have certain.
I didn't completely understand the merging of TEG with Texas grant, yet keeping it two different funding streams, and perhaps at the next time we talk about this, there can be a little more articulation.
And really what it's saying, until we find a way to bring independent students, non-traditional students into the pipeline, we don't really want to merge the programs fully, and until you put enough money into Texas grant to allow for that, because you don't want to dilute the TEG pot at the expense of the Texas grant pot of money.
Well, okay. And the other thing is I've asked for years, before the coordinating board, for years for Texas grants to really take a hard look at how other states do it. In particular, I think the first one was Georgia with the Hope Scholarship, and that was only need-based at the time.
Only merit-based.
Only merit-based. I'm sorry, only merit-based at the time. And ours was only need-based. And now that we're looking at some other things as far as merit, I know that Georgia has a whole different funding mechanism for theirs than we do, but to look nationally at other programs and give us a basis for why we're taking some of the best practices that they have and incorporating that. I think we're absolutely on the right track. And I think everybody pretty much agrees that we're on the right track. We just want to make sure that
details.
Yeah.
And I'll go through, because there are some things in here where they've talked to other peer states about their programs, and so I'll kind of it's a huge report, and I know it's a lot to go through.
It wasn't that hard to read.
Good.
Small words.
I'll point those things out, but then I'll get with David to see what kind of tracking we can do, how far back we can go for a cohort, and what kind of data we have to model what's happening to those students.
I do think we haven't had the plans, but there had been a discussion to amend the contract for these folks. And I think it would be appropriate to have them do that analysis, because they have the expertise. I mean, particularly the individual from Penn State works with us a lot, and we can give them access to the data if that's the right thing to do. But this is something that somebody's going to have to take a concerted look at very quickly. And we would have to take. Well, I'm not sure what you guys are doing. I didn't understand. So that may be the way to do it. But
We'll sit down and show you exactly what we're going to do. It'll be at least 30,000 students in the database.
We may be able to take some.
And I hope we'll look at different cohorts of students, from homeschoolers to the independents to non-traditional. I mean, we got to look at all aspects of that to see how. And we also, I don't know what our modeling entails, but we've got to have some kind of policy overlay with this incredible burden that the community colleges have. We have to have that might be an unintended consequence. I'd rather have some intended consequences, in terms of supporting our closing the gaps goal.
I think outside of this report, if you heard the Commissioner's testimony recently at the legislature, one of the most important points has been the lack of sufficient resources for community colleges, and really emphasizing that the legislature really hadn't understood that prior to the recent testimony.
Yes, Commissioner.
I just received an email from David Young in the governor's office, who is he here?
He may be listening.
He's listening. Let me read it. The financial aid report was due July 1st, and we gave you an extension until August 1st. It's important that final recommendations be submitted by that time so that the legislature and leadership can review them and seek input from appropriate people. A report that says that we need more time to evaluate will do very little good to anyone.
Do you want to say something about the Pell Plus and what we learned in North Carolina, how that might have some bearing?
Well, there were a group of us in North Carolina last week to talk to a little bit of folks about this project, making opportunity affordable, and one of the consultants talked about the Pell Plus program and the SMART program that the feds have put into place, and it was pointed out to us because a college prep curriculum is a prerequisite to qualify for that program. Because Texas is only one of 10 states that has that as a default curriculum, we're in a particularly advantageous position to benefit from those programs. So we have to examine the impact of those funds on our financial aid strategy in Texas. So, well, anyway, we clearly have a lot of work to do between now and the July board meeting.
Right. Can we have a special called committee meeting prior to the board meeting? If we did it the day before our board meeting, and if it's the pleasure of this committee to table this until then, or either that or move to accept pending, whatever you all want to do, and then if the day before the board meeting we could come back and have more information, and also from Senator Ellis's office as well. I'd like to know what he's thinking. So if we can do that, what do you all think? Is that something that you would be comfortable with?
The day before the board meeting, after the
either before or after agency ops. Understanding that we have a deadline, a critical deadline, with not only the report or the recommendations, and knowing that we have a lot of analysis to do between now and then because we need to meet the deadline with the report and recommendations, I move to table this item until such time we can meet as a special called committee meeting to review the results prior to the board meeting so that we can have an answer and a recommendation to the board for action by the board. Okay, in July. Elaine Mendoza has moved. Is there a second? Second by Lynn Phillips. Any discussion?
I think we ought to have some sort of workshop-like meeting. I mean, I don't think it ought to be a 30-minute meeting. We ought to have, a 10 to 12 meeting or something like that where we can make sure we have time to get our questions answered.
Okay. Is that all right with you? Sure. Right, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Someone, any opposed? That motion carries.
I invite you to come, Brenda.
That's right. I'll be there for ops, and I'll be there for you guys.
Good.
Okay. And thank you both for your input. We really value it. Thank you so much. Okay, it is almost 1 o'clock. We have quite a few more items left on the agenda. Do you want to move forward till, say, 1:30, then break for lunch and then you're posted at 2? What do you all want to do? Is that okay to move forward and see if we can complete it by 1:30?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Let's go.
Okay. Moving on. Agenda item 7, consideration of adopting the recommendation to the board on the report on financial aid. Did I just do this? I already did this. Agenda item 8, consideration of adopting the recommendation of the board to authorize the board chair and chair of the committee.
I think those are two different
They're
ones.
two different. One's the feasibility study, and the other one is the annual report on financial aid.
We did 6. We're on 7. You do need to do 6.
Oh, we do need, I'm sorry.
I apologize. Agenda item 7 is consideration of adopting the recommendation of the board on the report of financial aid for college students in Texas fiscal year 2007. Lois Hollis has a presentation on this item.
Okay, sorry, that's okay, and I'm going to go, I'll be brief. I just want to hit some of the highlights. What I'm going to do is talk about financial aid in terms of 3 different types of financial aid. Grant aid, which is money that does not have to be repaid. Work study, which is subsidized work that is subsidized either through federal government or state government, and loans, and everybody knows what loans are, type of money that has to be repaid. In 2007, over $5.35 billion in financial aid was awarded to over 616,000 students. When we first started giving these kinds of statistics and really making them known, it was 2002, and it was over $2 billion awarded. So a lot more money has come into the financial aid program since then, which is a wonderful thing. Okay, now how's that money divided up? Looking at Texas and nationwide, in Texas, 39% of the funds that go to students are in the form of grant aid, 1% is work study, and 60% is in the form of loans. If you look at the national picture, nationally states are doing a little better. 49% is gift aid, 1% is still work study, and 50% is loans. So in Texas, our students are borrowing more money than they are in the rest of the nation. When you look at who provides the aid, in Texas, 73% of the aid is provided by the federal government. 58% nationally is provided by the federal government. Texas does do better in state aid. 8% of the aid received by students is state aid. When you look at the national picture, it's 6%. So we are making some progress there. Other aid is larger nationally, and other aid is aid that the student comes to the college or university with. Lions Scholarship, Rotary Club, those types of things. Institutional aid also is higher nationally. It's 18% nationally compared to 12% in Texas, and a lot of that is because there are a lot of heavily endowed private institutions that make up a lot of that money. Next, what I want to do is show you the profile of grants and loans that students receive by income groups. Up here, you see the green line is grant aid, the red line is loan aid, and across the bottom you have different income groups. One thing to note is these numbers are duplicated. So many of the students receiving grants are also receiving loans. So don't try and add the percentages together because you'll go crazy. Okay. I can't say that.
Yay, you just did.
And it's on the record, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Anyway. What you'd expect to see is that in the lower income groups, those students get more grant aid, and as you go up income groups, it changes, and they get more. Students get more loan aid. When you look at the first 4 income groups, that makes up 67% of all the aid received, and if you look at those students, at least 50% of them are receiving loans. So there's been this notion out there that if you're a low-income student, you really don't have to worry because you're going to get all the grant aid you need. In Texas, that's not the case. 50% of them are taking out loans. And that's just something we need to be cautious about because we don't want students graduating with a huge debt burden. Okay, next is Texas grant, the supply and demand. And what this graph shows is in red is if funding stays steady, which is now $427 million a biennium, which is $93 million more than we had last biennium. Wonderful thing. If it stays steady, though, we're only going to be able to serve between 16 and 18,000 students, and the demand is going to be over 80 or 90,000 students. So let me put this also in perspective. This is saying if everybody who has financial need were to get a Texas grant, and that is if you had financial need of $2,000, you're part of this group. Okay. And then I will just finish up by saying okay, financial aid in Texas is increasing, but a lot of the aid is in the form of loans. Low-income students are borrowing at a high rate, and if we really want to close the gaps, we still have to put more money into gift aid, and you guys have been great in going out and advocating for that aid. The $93 million we got last session was a wonderful thing, helped a lot of new students get Texas grant that would have otherwise gotten it. I'll be glad to answer any questions you've got about the report. These are just the highlights.
We have a magic number for, excuse me. It's okay. I was going to call you. Do we have a magic number for this next session?
We do, and I printed it out because I thought you might ask that question. So I will hand it out to you all as soon as.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, the recommendation is to adopt, and let me make sure I understand that. It's to adopting the recommendation on the report. Okay, all right, I just want to make sure I understood. Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Elaine Mendoza, second.
Second.
Second by Lynn Phillips, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 8. Consideration of adopting the recommendation to the board to authorize the board chair and chair of the committee on participation and success to approve the adult basic education and post-secondary alignment report. Evie Hyatt and her staff are available to respond to any questions. And does everybody have this information in front of you? Questions? No? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Elaine Mendoza, second by Lynn Phillips. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next section of today's agenda will be the discussion and consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee for April 2008 adoption of certain rules. We have 16 sets of rules, amendments to consider today, and staff are available for questions or comments. These rules will come before the full board at our July meeting if approved to go forward by our committee today. So I think we have to take each one individually, and it's items 9A through 9P. Okay. Do we need to take each one individually? Each individual motion? Can we? Okay. All right.
Make it clear
that we're lumping
to lump certain ones together, that each one is
identified individually. Got it. All right. Okay, do we want to pull any for discussion, or do I have a motion to accept agenda items 9A through 9P, and you have to say each one?
Just a real quick question.
Yes.
Have there been any comments received? I know that it says comments were not received as of the pulling out of this package, but
The majority are ours, and no comments.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
yes, I move to approve them. Item 9A, B, C, or do I have to read them? Okay, 9A through P.
Okay. Motion by Elaine Mendoza. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lynn Phillips. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Items carry. Motion carries. Okay, before we move to agenda item 10, I had asked Elaine Mendoza if she would talk a little bit about the progress of the P16 in Bexar County. I've watched with a lot of admiration with your leadership and that of the entire community in San Antonio, the things that you all are doing. I think that every time there's a new P16, it just gets better and better and better. And I just want to tell you how impressed I am with all of the things that you're doing and the things that I'm hearing that you're doing.
Well, thank you.
So I'd like to give you a few moments to talk about it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And again, I apologize for being delayed. We're moving along diligently yet cautiously. We did set up all of our who we are and who we are not which is I think, very important for P16 councils to establish, because things can come at you. You need to be able to have a filter by which you can determine what you should take on and what you should not take on. So we went through a process of what we are and what we are not. And I think in the October meeting, we're going to have a formal report given to this committee and I don't know, to the board, anyway, from our council, so we'll do that. We hired an executive director, Mr. Zachary, who is the chair of our council. Mayor Hardberger asked Mr. Zachary to chair it. He has been so generous. Our executive director is housed at Zachary headquarters in downtown San Antonio. She has a beautiful office overlooking the Riverwalk, etc. Yeah, it's wonderful. And we are in the beginnings of really, we had the formation committee put in priorities and different goals for the council to begin completing. Our council then came together, and we're about to embark on an effort to reprioritize, make sure that we want those activities established. We hooked up with the E3 Alliance and looked at their, what do they call that, the mission? Their Blueprint for Success, I believe it's called. Yes. Paul, thank you. The Blueprint for Success, and we found a lot of things that were overlapping and some that we weren't addressing. And so we actually pulled in some of their thoughts into our work plan, so to speak. In June, the council will come together, and we're actually going to reprioritize and make sure that we have everything covered, and then appoint chairs for each of these areas to begin the actual work. So we're moving along. We're just being very cautious and diligent about the whole thing. How many members do you have? We're about 23. We cover 4 superintendents. We have our public higher ed institutions represented from our health science center as well as from UTSA. We have our independents represented by Charlie Cottrell, Dr. Cottrell from St. Mary's. We have, of course, Bruce Leslie, our chancellor of the ACCD. We have Avance, which is a group representing early childhood. We have our United Way executive director, which represents community groups. We have our workforce and our worksource director on board representing workforce. We have the regional education service center. Dr. Terry Smith is on the council representing Region 20. We have employers, 4 large business, 2 small business, and 1 board member. So that's about the council. We try to make sure that all stakeholders were represented, but most importantly, on each of the committees that are coalesced around our priority areas, well, we're going to have further reach to other experts that are in other school districts that are not represented in the 4, as well as other community stakeholders, to make sure that we reach out even further and bring the community together around these initiatives. We also have a parent representative, and a teacher.
Wow. How are you going to handle the inevitable of all the thousands of millions of dollars that are going to flow in? Are you a nonprofit, or are you a
Yes,
501c3?
Yes, we are.
You are.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And we have determined that in what we are not, we're not a huge organization. We're going to be lean and mean. We don't want to have to constantly be raising monies to support staff. We feel like our niche is in the research side of data collection, promotion of best practices, highlighting success, speaking with one voice for the educational community and things like that, versus running or funding programs.
And you have 4 school superintendents, and obviously they're charged with making sure that the rest of the superintendents and districts are all knowledgeable about what's going on.
And a school board member.
And a school board member.
I'm talking, yeah.
Whoa.
We have, of course, we have our Bexar County Coalition of School Board Presidents. They have a spot on the council, and it's the president.
Isn't that what Julian Trevino started?
Yeah, we started this Hispanic Chamber, but, right, Bobby Blunt, who is on the Northside Independent School District Board, is the chairman of that coalition, and he serves on the council. So
that's awesome.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
That's great.
Sounds like some very elegant design.
It really is.
I know someone who had a hand in that. Yeah. Dr. Ruiz was there with us in our formation committee. So we had a lot of great debate on coming up with this design, and I'm sure there's going to be some tweaking over it and some redesign as we grow and as we tackle certain issues.
Well, I hope that there are opportunities. I know that the chairs of the P16s are meeting regularly. I would hope that there are opportunities for the entire groups of P16s. I know we've done it a couple times, but now that we've got, you guys, ready and cooking, I know that we can all learn from y'all and others. So I hope that there are more opportunities where we can get together.
Well, we benefited greatly from the pioneers like Houston, like El Paso, and so we greatly appreciate some of the forethought that have gone out prior to us.
See, you waited for us to make all the mistakes, and then y'all.
We wanted to be on the leading edge, not the bleeding edge.
There you go. Yeah, we just got a grant yesterday, though. You weren't here on it. Yeah. Good deal. Congratulations to you.
I just wanted to say that Dr. Reese, recently, I guess 2 weeks ago, and you probably saw that in your weekly report, has also been in the Tyler area to assist them with the development of their P16 council.
Right. Well, moving along. Okay, we have agenda item 10, which is we have written updates on P16 initiatives. Dr. Laredo, do you want to comment on any of these?
This has to do where we are in terms of the status of outreach and the field specialist. And so, as you know, at the last meeting, there was a motion and second and pass to go ahead and eliminate those P16 field specialists, but there's a refocus in that effort. And so what this report does is provide you the information of what they've been involved in, how they have contributed, and if you have any questions, Chris is also here. Letters have also gone out for that termination and to the next steps. But Chris is here if you have any questions further beyond that.
Okay. Any questions about any of the items? No? Okay, and I've been in touch with you about the African American Male Advisory Committee, and I've got some dates for you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Any other comments? Okay, there's no action required on that, and agenda item 11 is a review and discussion of P&S committee agenda items for the coordinating board meeting in July. Is there anything to discuss? No? No? Okay, any further business?
I will add the writers that you've asked on that report.
Okay. And we will start with the college readiness and all of the legal document that's now not legal size.
That's right.
Correct. Okay, if there are no other questions, then that concludes the participation in the Success Committee meeting. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned. It is. And we'll reconvene at what time, Liz? 2 o'clock. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock for the next committee meeting.